Turid Sayer, together with her teenage sons Magne and Lauritz, return to the Norwegian city of Edda after many years of absence. At the entrance to the city, their car gets stuck behind an old man in an electric wheelchair who is trying to turn right. Magne gets out of the car to help, and the old man's wife approaches him. Looking into the guy's eyes, she smiles with satisfaction. He's a good boy, and then she touches his forehead. Magne's iris changes color for a moment, and then the guy feels something unusual in the perception of the world. He returns to the car and, trying to close the window, breaks off the window lifter handle. Stunned, Magne turns the thing in his hands and suddenly says that it's going to rain. Mother and brother laugh. There is not a cloud in the sky, and immediately the car is showered with a heavy rain. They continue on their way and get to their grandmother's old house. Lauritz is not happy that there is a shabby-looking trailer near the house, and Magne picks up an advertisement that calls for making the air of the city cleaner. The next morning, the guys go to school. Oddly enough, the brothers are assigned to the same class. The thing is, Magne is dyslexic, which is expressed by difficulties with word recognition and insufficient abilities in reading and writing. Magne's attention is immediately drawn to a pretty blonde, Gry, but Lauritz is ahead of him, and Magne has to sit in the back of the class next to Isolde, who is not popular at school. A lesson on the Scandinavian gods begins, and Magne learns that Edda is the last Norwegian city to convert to Christianity. It was here that Ragnarok took place, during which the gods died and the fate of the giants remained unknown. During lunch, Magne sits at Isolde's desk again and learns that she's on the side of the Greens and is fighting against the pollution of the world. She also introduces the guy to Fjord Utol as son of the owner of the Utol Industries factories, Fjord's sister Saxa, and their mother, the director of the school by the name of Ran. And then she talks about her blog on YouTube. At the end of the classes, the two leave school together, and then Isolde notices that one of the wheels in her bicycle is bent. Much to the girl's astonishment, Magne easily fixes the brake and returns the wheel to its original condition, which surprises him as well. In addition, he notices that his eyesight has begun to improve. The next day, he, Isolde, and Gry get a general assignment in sociology and begin to study democracy. Magne suggests studying the topic by using their town as an example. At this moment, he sees his mother, who has come to talk to the director. The women discuss boy's progress at school and recall the tragedy that happened many years ago when the boy's father died under mysterious circumstances. Later, the mother notices that Magne is not wearing any glasses and does not understand how this can be. But she's distracted by Vidar Utol's car. It turns out that she and Vidar have known each other for a long time. After returning home, Vidar tells his wife Ran about the meeting with the woman, while their children Fjord and Saxa discuss their appearance and whether it matches their age. Vidar gives them a task to follow Magne, who is currently engaged in repairs and notices a rune carved on his father's tools. Later, the guy visits Isolde's page and looks through her materials about the strange death of the fish in the fjord. The next day, the girl invites him to her place and reminds him that he no longer needs glasses. While choosing water in the store, she explains to Magne that he can't drink tap water in Edda, and the store clerk suddenly warns the guy about the danger of the vernal equinox. In Isolde's house, the guy finds out that the history teacher, Erich, is the girl's father. At dinner, she invites him to go with her to the mountain as she monitors the speed at which the glacier is melting. They can go down by paragliding. The girl asks her father questions about her mother's death, but he keeps silent. Magne shares his memories of his father, and sweeping the girl's diary off the table, finds out that she has been hopelessly in love with Saxa for a long time. The next day, he tells his classmates about the upcoming hike in the mountains, while Fjord invites everyone to a party at his house. Returning home, Magne finds his mother repairing the fence, and his attention is drawn to his father's sledgehammer marked with the rune. The next day, Magne and Isolde go to the mountains. Soon they reach a blocked bridge, but Magne resolutely steps over the warning sign. Suddenly, the boy gets a text that his mother is unwell. He hurries to the city and Isolde goes on alone. Meanwhile, Vidar's car is driving along the mountain road. Stopping on the side of the road, Vidar goes outside, undresses, and starts hunting deer grazing on the mountain. With one blow, he kills the animal and rips out its heart. Meanwhile, Isolde reaches the glacier and sees her marks. She takes water samples and then notices the thawed entrance to the cave and photographs it. Once inside, she finds a door blocking the entrance to the depth of the cave. Standing over the fjord, Vidar eats the raw heart of the deer and emits a heart-rending cry, which frightens Isolde. Upon reaching home, Magne discovers that his mother is absolutely fine and, angry at his brother's stupid joke, goes outside. He sees Isolde paragliding down the mountain. Suddenly, the paraglider starts drifting towards electric wires. The guy hurries to the crash site and finds the girl's lifeless body. Vidar also arrives and tries to help her and then calls for an ambulance. But nothing can be done anymore. Returning home, Magne throws away his glasses and sees the sledgehammer. The distraught guy throws the hammer and it disappears into the clouds, which are instantly covered with lightning. After everything that happened, Magne is taking the death of her friend hard and decides never to wear glasses again. The classmates ask a lot of questions about the girl's death, but he can't say anything definite. He enters the classroom and sits down at the desk whose second half is covered with flowers and burning candles. Ren makes an announcement that there will be no history class today, but suddenly Isolde's father enters the classroom. He cannot stay at home alone. The man asks the school not to cancel the vernal equinox holiday because Isolde would be against such a decision. Later, the police announce that the girl's death was caused by a thunderstorm strike to the dome of the paraglider. But Magne objects. Everything happened before his eyes, and there was no thunderstorm at that time. Nevertheless, the case is being closed. On the same day, Vidar asks Stuart to get the insurance money for his car, which was smashed by some madman. And he sends the woman photos in which Stuart recognizes the sledgehammer. She hurries home to ask Magne questions, but he himself is shocked by such an accusation. The guy calculates how far he threw the hammer, 1,537 meters. But this is impossible. Magne buys a new sledgehammer and throws it in a deserted place late at night. And then he calculates the distance, 541 meters, which is several times higher than the world's record for hammer throwing. Meanwhile, Vidar examines the sledgehammer while Ren speaks about the experiences of the school children who sincerely mourn the dead girl. And then the husband suddenly admits that he killed Isolde because she found the entrance to the cave. The woman gets angry. They agreed not to touch the children, but since it happened, they need to find Isolde's lost phone. At school, Gry and Magne continue to work on the project together and listen to a warning not to blame the destruction of the planet only on the rich. Later at home, sorting out his mother's things, Lauritz finds an old blouse. Magne invites Gry to work at his house, which leads to a heartfelt conversation about Magne's past. Meanwhile, Turid notices Erich in the store looking lost. She expresses sympathy and the man is grateful to her for it. Lauritz finds Magne watching the weather forecast. Magne insists that there was no thunderstorm the day Isolde died, and then he admits that it was he who threw the sledgehammer into Vido's car, but his brother doesn't believe it. The celebration of the vernal equinox begins at school. The classmates show Saxa a photo of an improvised altar at the site of Isolde's death, while Vidar inspects this area in search of the girl's phone. He notices that Magne is visiting the place too. At school, everyone is shocked by the sight of Lauritz, who came to the evening in his mother's blouse and with makeup. The headmistress opens the evening and offers a moment of silence for Isolde. Saxa sings a song about her native land, which is interrupted by the appearance of Magne. Later, Lauritz advises his brother to forget about Gry because Fjord is already hitting on her. Later, Lauritz starts hitting on Yakutu. Then the headmistress takes the two boys away. Magne sits down with Gry, but Fjord invites the girl to a dance, and the guy has nothing to do but sit and watch. Watching them, he crushes the bottle in his hand and it shatters into small pieces. He goes to the men's room where he meets Oscar, whose mother is a police officer, and he blurts out that the girl died from hitting a rock. At this time, hot dancing begins in the hall, and Magne sees the headmistress surrounded by boys. Fjord puts on his music and he and Saxa begin a strange sensual dance to which Lauritz joins. The three of them squirm on the dance floor much to the delight and astonishment of the crowd. Magne goes to Isolde's father's house and informs him about the change in the cause of his daughter's death. He's sure that the police are lying, but the inconsolable father asks to not disturb the peace of his dead daughter. Out of anger, Magne easily moves the multi-ton car in front of the house, which terrifies Erich. At this time, Fjord, Lauritz, and Oscar are going to the altar, and younger Utul, ridiculing people's stupid beliefs, urinates on the burning candles. Oscar manages to record this and upload everything to the internet. Fjord orders the video to be deleted, but it has already gone online. Magne is reviewing numerous notes about violations of environmental regulations by Utul Industries, which Erich shows him, and he throws away the girl's diary because she has the right to personal secrets. And at Utul's house, the owner is feeding his dog when Ran shows him a scandalous photo from the altar. The husband promises to deal with this issue. Sex is trying to find out at least something new about Magne from Gry, who stayed overnight at their house, but she does not know anything. She goes to the bathroom and witnesses Vidar beating his son. The man is furious. People worship them too and sacrifice to them. Therefore his son insulted him with his act too. Frightened, Gry hurries to take refuge in Sax's room. The next day, Isolde's funeral takes place and everyone goes to church, but returning home, the Sayer family finds their home trashed. The brothers go to the homeless neighbor, accusing him of stealing from their house. He admits that he has been in the apartment, but only after another man who arrived there in a big black car accompanied by a dog. The brothers realize that it is Vidar but do not understand why he needed it. Later, Magne goes to see a therapist. He feels that everything has changed around him but does not find an explanation for this. He talks about the robbery and accuses the police of inaction, and the therapist tells Ren about the session. Back home, Magne tells his mother about the conversation with the neighbor and blames Vidar, but Turet says that it's absurd and does not want to hear anything about it, especially since Erich has arrived. He hands Isolde's laptop to Magne because his computer is already failing. The guy searches the computer and finds data on changes in natural conditions in the vicinity of Edda. The same evening, Ren tells her husband about the therapy session. She is furious. Not only did Vidar break into Magne's house, but the guy's neighbor saw him. And now everyone can find out about this inexplicable case. The next day, Gry confesses to Fjord that she saw the beating, and it shocked her. But he changes the topic of the conversation. The girl agrees to ride with him, but Lauritz and Saxa are also in the car. Meanwhile, Magne is talking to a police representative again. He knows for sure that there was no wind that day, but the woman objects. He said that he got to the city in half an hour and no one can do that. The young people are driving along a mountain road and Fjord puts on a song in the ancient Icelandic language, which is surprising to Gry. Suddenly, a bird breaks against the windshield of the car. Saxa and Fjord come out to look at it. The sister reminds them of the need to learn at least something about Magne and eats the bird. Puzzled by the officer's words, Magne goes to a deserted warehouse and starts jogging to see how fast he runs. He does a 100-meter dash in just 7 seconds. Meanwhile, Erich has given Isolde's jacket, which has traces of blood on it, and Vidar follows Magne and witnesses an accident in which the guy is hit by a snowplow. He joyfully announces to the family about Magne's death, who interfered with their affairs. Then Vidar confesses to the children that he killed Isolde because she found dangerous things hidden by them in the glacier. Ren reminds them of the danger they are exposed to by getting close to mortals. Meanwhile, the doctors at the hospital are perplexed. The guy who was hit by the snowplow has no injuries at all. Magne goes home, and he doesn't know that at this very moment the body of his deceased neighbor, who was a witness to the robbery of their house, was being brought to the morgue. At home, Turid thanks the gods for saving her child's life, and Magne makes another note: he is now also invulnerable. His sight and sense of smell also have improved. The next day, during the lesson, there is a skirmish when Magne blames the Utul plants for the emissions of harmful substances which caused the inhabitants of the fjord to die. Saxa resolutely defends her father. After the lesson, Magne asks the teacher to test the dried blood from Isolde's jacket. He is sure that there's someone else's blood on the clothes. At least they smell different. The woman is surprised by his sense of smell and agrees to run the test. Later, Gry asks him questions about the incident. He shows her the jacket and asks her to smell it, but the girl does not detect the difference at all. In the afternoon, a group of classmates goes to a cafe where Oscar breaks the news about Rand's behavior the previous evening, which he learned about from his friends. Saxa is outraged by the silly rumors and stirs the conversation towards Gry, who is still a virgin. This pisses Gry off, and she goes home where she finds her father in front of a can of beer. The man is upset. The insurance company refused to pay him money for his sick lungs. No one sees the connection between the disease and the emissions from the U2 factories. Meanwhile, Vidar is raging in his house. No mortal could have survived. Who is this guy? To which Ran promises to find out everything very soon, since in the evening the brothers will come to them for dinner. Magne and Lauritz go to the Utul house, unaware that they are the only guests of the evening. They are seated at a chic table and are treated to alcoholic drinks. The hosts do not skimp on the drinks. Vidar pours Magne mead, the drink of the ancient gods. Feeling intoxicated, Magne begins to behave inappropriately, and throwing an axe at the target hanging on the wall simply breaks it. And then he confides in Ren about his new strength. The woman is surprised and offers to fight with her hands. The guy promises to defeat her and holds out his hand. They begin to fight, and Magne realizes that he cannot defeat the fragile-looking woman. They fight without restraining themselves, and at some point he suddenly sees the true appearance of an ancient monster hiding behind the guise of the beauty. At this moment the table breaks down. Jumping up from behind the wreckage, Magne sees the woman in front of him again. He goes to the bathroom and after washing his face, looks up at the mirror and suddenly sees the face of an ancient warrior staring back at him. Coming up next, a recap of the following episodes. In 2025, aliens occupy Earth and first enclose cities with 300-meter walls to limit human movement. Welcome to day 348 of our occupation. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. One day, truck driver Will bids farewell to his wife Katie and their children, Grace and Bram, and drives to work through the streets of Los Angeles, patrolled by soldiers in red helmets. Later, from his conversation with a colleague, it becomes clear that Will is planning an illegal trip beyond the wall. He reaches a smuggler who places him in a metal box and covers it with ice. That's when Will discovers he has a fellow passenger, to whom he reveals he's looking for his 12-year-old son left behind the wall. Soon the vehicle enters through the gates, then an explosion occurs, flipping the truck over. Dazed, Will crawls out only to be captured by the red helmets. That same morning, Katie goes to an underground dealer for forbidden insulin. By restricting medicine, the invaders weed out the weak, making it very hard to obtain. She presents a bottle of alcohol for trade, but finds the insulin spoiled. She has to fight her way out with a pistol, risking drone detection and death for all. But Katie can't afford to be robbed. Meanwhile, Will is imprisoned, unable to call his wife. Katie is indeed worried, as walking the streets at night is prohibited. Then her sister Maddie arrives with her son, who needs the insulin. Katie assures she will find the medication and asks to stay with the children. She goes to her husband's colleague, who lies about not knowing Will's whereabouts. Katie has to return home empty-handed. Suddenly an alarm blares over the city. Katie hides under a military truck parked at the curb. A drone hovers above just as a prisoner is shoved into the vehicle. Just when Katie seems doomed, the truck starts moving and the drone flies away. The woman makes it home. In the morning, she visits her friend Bruce Sard and reports Will's disappearance. It turns out he, like her husband, was with the FBI before the aliens arrived. He asked her to return home while he checks his remaining contacts, but Katie goes to the hospital, where she learns of the explosion at the city's entrance. Amidst the chaos, she sneaks into a storeroom and steals several vials of insulin. In prison, Will hears his cellmate's confessions, soon to be sent to work at a factory for the aliens. Then soldiers arrive, one shouting Will's real surname. He's recognized and taken to the Green Zone, where the world's leaders now reside. There, he's met by Snyder, a representative of the Los Angeles governor. Snyder knows Will's military and FBI background and his knack for catching dangerous criminals. Since the military and police vanished after the aliens' arrival, Will had to hide, but now Snyder needs his help, offering his family full protection in return. The Masters demand security, so Will lead a special unit, infiltrate the rebels, and capture their leader Geronimo. As the alien spacecraft is about to launch, Snyder takes Will to the balcony, hoping to persuade him to switch sides. If he refuses, his family will be sent to the factory. At night, the red helmets bring Will home, frightening his family, but he reassures them, explaining he was just in an accident. However, Katie realizes her husband is lying. Hearing he went to look for Charlie, she cries, but the news of Snyder's proposal enrages her. she would never become the wife of a traitor. In the morning, the family is woken up by the smell of bacon, and upon entering the kitchen, they find Snyder there. He has prepared breakfast and even brewed coffee, which is now impossible to find. As he eats, he lists all the benefits of their new status: security, a personal tutor for the children, good food and work. Moreover, the aliens allow the couple to reopen their old bar. However, Will is only willing to agree in exchange for the return of his son, who is in another block. Snyder promises to consider this option. The next morning, Katie arrives at an unassuming house where members of the resistance, whom she informs that the occupiers have hired her husband to find them, await her. The following morning, Will goes to work, quickly realizing that Snyder deceived him. Instead of becoming the commander of a special unit, he is subordinated to Phyllis, who assigns him to find the guy who planted an explosive device at the city entrance. He is partnered with Bo, an old policeman. Meanwhile, Katie arrives at her bar and finds her lost son's belongings. Broussard interrupts her cleaning, wanting to know what the police have found out about the explosion at the customs, but Will has just started his job and has no information yet. Meanwhile, Will and Bo approach the house where the girlfriend of the wanted criminal lives, and by deception, they force him to run out the back door. The agent catches up with him when suddenly a drone appears. Will fearlessly looks directly into the lens, and it instantly disappears. The police bring the detainee to the station, where Will's arrested colleague is found. The man begs Phyllis to release him as his informant, but she refuses. Then Will goes to his trailer, but his family is no longer there because the woman and child are entering his house at that moment. After hiding the mother and son upstairs, Katie drives to Broussard as the couple needs new documents, but he refuses to help as the resistance cannot take risks. Katie leaves. At home, she confronts Will, who, learning that his friend's family is with him, takes them to a man who makes fake documents. On their way, they are stopped by the Red Helmets. However, after checking the pass, they let him go with apologies, leaving Katie in a state of shock. They safely arrive at the Masters, and while he makes the documents, Will tells Katie that he caught the guy who planted the bomb. And once he finds Geronimo, they will be able to bring Charlie back. Later, Will takes the woman and child to a camp where displaced people live. Katie meets with the resistance leader. Alexander calms her down, as the caught boy belongs to another group, but he promises to warn them. At the station, Will discovers that a group of prisoners is being prepared for shipment to the factory. Phyllis asks him to resign himself. During the arrival, the city's entire defense was destroyed in 8 hours. What can a bunch of rebels do? At night, Katie comforts her distraught husband when he is informed that the suspect has divulged the location of his accomplice's hideout. He leaves, and Katie rushes to the phone to warn Broussard. Meanwhile, the prisoners are brought to the location, forced to strip, disinfected, and then redressed. At the same time, the Red Helmets arrive at the location named by the detainee and find only the bodies of rebels. Will realizes that there is a spy among the police. The next morning, a man with a card enters an inconspicuous house on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Immediately, a radio broadcast begins with calls to overthrow the occupation, voiced by Geronimo. The Red Helmets detect the transmission and head to the location. At the same time, Bram duplicates the broadcast recording and hides the cassettes under the bed, but the military, storming into the house, find no one there. That same day, Katie participates in a resistance armed attack on a food truck for the first time. During the operation, one of their comrades, Kim, is fatally wounded. Katie tries to help him, but Broussard finishes the boy off, shocking Katie. Then, drones arrive and start shooting random passers-by. However, Broussard calculates the authorities' response time to the incident. After the operation, Katie rushes home and barely manages to wash off the blood traces. She is so shaken that she doesn't want to explain anything and locks herself in her room. That day at school, Bram gives a cassette to his teacher, who notices a change in the pattern of the alien ship's takeoffs. He saw a very large object circling Earth in the sky and now intends to make a more powerful telescope. The police arrive at the scene of the incident. Will notices the body of a boy who was clearly finished off. Phyllis orders to take his photo and quickly learns his name. After that, the Red Helmets go to his house and arrest his parents. Will is outraged by this and fails to notice Broussard in the crowd, who heads to the resistance base and reports what happened. But Alexander is confident that Kim left no traces. Will then goes home, where Katie explains her morning behavior with the things found in the bar belonging to their son. Distraught, Will blames himself for being powerless against the masters, but his wife promises her support. Later, Katie goes to meet Broussard. He justifies his actions as saving Kim from torture, but now she needs to extract everything her husband learned during the investigation from him. At the same time, Bram's friend asks for his help and leads the boy to an underground tunnel beneath the wall, where her brother slipped and injured his leg. It turns out their father worked there before the arrival, and now they use the tunnel to get beyond the wall. Will and Bo go to a cultural center, listed among the places visited by the deceased Kim, and find a rebel weapons cache. At the same time, Bram's friends tell him they've been going to the other side for 6 months to get food, as there's no one beyond the wall. Alexander learns about the lost weapons and asks Broussard to warn Katie about the inadmissibility of her husband's actions. He fulfills this request, but Katie is more concerned about her family's safety. Nevertheless, in the evening, she opens the bar to visitors. Suddenly, in the midst of the festivities, Snyder walks in. The man congratulates everyone on the opening of the establishment and then explains to Will that by revitalizing such places, the masters allow people to safely release tension. Hearing this, Katie becomes furious, thinking they've sold out to the aliens for the sake of getting their son back. But Will is convinced that by continuing to work for Snyder, he will be able to find Charlie. Later, he speaks with Bo again about the spy. However, the former policeman, who has faced betrayal, doesn't believe in such a possibility. Meanwhile, Katie tells Broussard that the quick finding of the Resistance's premises is explained by a huge database in a woman who knows how to use it. She's ready to reveal her name if Will remains unharmed. Broussard swears to this. The next day, a squad of red helmets bursts into the school. The military brutally arrest a teacher and beat a student. Returning to the base, one of them removes his helmet, revealing himself to be Broussard. Later, he explains to Alexander that he learned the duty schedule of the red helmets. Now they have a chance to be in the right place at the right time. That same day, Phyllis shows Will information about the Los Angeles rebels. If they unite and go on the offensive, the entire block will be cleaned out. She hopes Will understands what this means for him and his family and counts on his loyalty. Meanwhile, Katie takes the children for a walk with Lindsay, the governess appointed by the authorities, and turns on the streetlight, sending a prearranged signal. The sound of breaking glass is heard. The woman counts to 10, then pulls out a fire extinguisher. Only after extinguishing the fire does she call emergency services. The red helmets and Will arrive. He is outraged to find that his house is being searched, but such is the protocol. Katie is asked to go to Phyllis for interrogation. She promises the family enhanced security. Moreover, the neighbors are warned that if something happens to them, they will be held responsible. Katie is shocked, as now they will be feared. Phyllis interrogates her about everything, even the personal relationship between husband and wife. Meanwhile, Maddie goes to the Commission for the Preservation of Cultural and Artistic Items in search of work and introduces herself to Charlotte, the director, hoping to become her assistant. After his wife's interrogation, Will confronts Phyllis, but she shows him tapes found under Bram's bed and advises him to keep a closer eye on his son. For now, she'll hold on to these pieces of evidence. Furious, Will drives home, and after a tough conversation, Bram shows his father posters. Their appearance in the city signals the release of a new broadcast by Geronimo. Katie manages to extract a promise from Alexander not to touch her husband, and in return identifies her husband's boss, Phyllis, in a photo. Later, another broadcast by Geronimo begins in the city. This time, the police immediately detect the signal coming from the library and rush there. The man hears their approach but utters his final words, calling for resistance. He is arrested, although Will is sure it's not Geronimo, greatly disappointing Snyder, who had already informed the masters of their victory. That same day, Maddie witnesses Charlotte's anger, who needs a painting by a specific artist. Maddie reports she knows who had collections in the city, as she worked as an art historian. Meanwhile, the arrested man confesses during interrogation that he found the text for the broadcast in a pipe. The police go to the site and verify that the indicated pipe leads to the green zone. Charlotte's workers find art items in the house Maddie mentioned. In gratitude, the owner takes her on board and promises to help with insulin. That same day, Phyllis informs Will that as a sign of trust, she destroyed the tapes. The man goes home where Bram admits he listened to Geronimo because he was the only one who instilled hope in people. Katie arrives at the bar earlier than usual and finds Phyllis in the hall, who wants to talk to her alone. Phyllis talks about her husband and draws parallels with Will, who loves his wife so much that he doesn't see who she really is. She shows surveillance photos from the truck attack site and warns Katie that she's gotten involved with the wrong people. If Katie wants to survive, she will now work for her. After the conversation, Phyllis returns home, where her paralyzed husband lies. She greets him, but upon entering the living room, she finds Broussard there. Phyllis immediately understands why he came and asks him to kill her husband too. Broussard shoots. The next day, Beau and Will go to the crime scene and find the word Geronimo written on the wall. Snyder is furious because Phyllis was very close to the masters and demands the criminal be found. A message comes in about the capture of one of the Geronimo group. Will interrogates the young man, who gives an address in the green zone. The Red Helmets burst in there, finding a concealed room and several people who call themselves the Geronimo group. Meanwhile, Bram, accompanied by his girlfriend, passes under the wall and ends up in a deserted city, where they find necessary supplies in a huge warehouse. Back in Los Angeles, news is broadcast that the underground has been eliminated, although Will doesn't believe it. Snyder once again becomes enraged because he sees that the captured couple doesn't look like terrorists. He refuses to fulfill the agreement about searching for Charlie and appoints Will as the head of the group. Will immediately begins searching for the mole, and Phyllis's assistant, Jennifer, reminds him of his wife, suggesting he might be the source of the leak. Returning home, Will sees Bram giving his sister markers brought from beyond the wall, but the son lies that he traded them for oranges. Snyder interrogates a man who claimed to be Geronimo, but he confesses that he is just an actor. Snyder convinces him to play out his role in exchange for being sent to another block. At the same time, Bram rushes to his teacher and promises to get him a powerful lens for his telescope. Will, secretly from his wife, searches the bar but finds nothing incriminating except for a book he doesn't recognize. The trial of Geronimo is broadcast on all channels, featuring relatives of the terrorism victims, and a scaffold for execution is erected in the square. The actor plays his role, believing Snyder's promises to eradicate terrorism. He realizes he's been deceived only when he finds himself on the scaffold, but can do nothing about it. Immediately after the execution, Snyder invites Will to join him, promising to show him something unusual. At the same time, Alexander's group prepares for a new attack, with Katie among the rebels. On the way, Will expresses his outrage to Snyder, who achieved nothing by executing the actor, but Snyder reminds him of the need to pacify the population and that he's bought time to search for the real Geronimo. Snyder's car moves through the city, guarded by a group of red helmets, including Broussard. At one of the turns, a decoy road worker sends them on a detour, and when the convoy slows down, Broussard shoots his colleagues. Snyder tries to run, but Will locks the doors as the car is armored. Rebels, disguised in red helmets uniforms, shoot at the car and manage to pull the door off, but Will shoots from inside and still gets Snyder out of the fire. Drones appear, but the rebels manage to escape. Will leads Snyder into the bar, where Katie arrives at the same time. Snyder is hysterical, but Will cannot guarantee protection by his own means. Katie asks Will in private not to risk himself for such a worthless person, but Will cannot leave a person without help. Realizing that the phone doesn't work, he goes outside to a payphone to call for backup. Meanwhile, Alexander, learning about Will's role in saving Snyder, is furious, but then Katie communicates via radio that the traitor is in the bar. She returns to Snyder and keeps the conversation going to lower his guard. He boasts about being a professor of economics, which earned him a high position. He mentions there are 7 more colonies, but he doesn't know what happens beyond them. Will returns, announcing that he has managed to call for reinforcement and it's on its way. Katie bandages Will's wound, and he confesses that Geronimo is a collective image, not one person. Katie asks not to interfere with Snyder's killing, but Will reminds her that another will take his place. Then, Snyder reveals that his people have found their son, and he is currently negotiating Charlie's return. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door. They hide Snyder in the bathroom. Broussard enters in a red helmet's uniform and searches the place. Katie leads him to the basement, asking to ensure Will's safety, but he can't guarantee anything as her husband is always diving into the fray. Broussard eventually leaves, but Will is sure he is a member of the resistance and will return with backup. They barricade the doors with Snyder, who again mentions Charlie, infuriating Katie as she's tired of his blackmail. Meanwhile, the rebels try to break into the bar, but fail. A frightened Snyder tells Will that the masters have tested virtually every person, thus filtering out those they don't need, but he has never seen the aliens himself. As the rebels continue to press, Will orders Katie to hide, readying himself to defend Snyder. Then a smoke grenade is thrown in, the militants storm in. Will opens fire. When one of the rebels finds Will, Katie shoots him, but Broussard aims at her and her husband forces her to drop the weapon. The rebel herds them into the basement and leaves. However, Will finds a machine gun and chases after him, but by the time he gets upstairs everyone is gone. Then, the real Red Helmets arrive and pull Snyder from the closet where Will had hidden him. In the evening, Will tries to reassure Katie, explaining that Snyder's tribunal was just a farce. There is no people's hero, and those who attacked them have no relation to Geronimo. Meanwhile, Alexander concludes that Katie is a double agent, simply leading them on. Meanwhile, Maddie starts a relationship with Charlotte's husband, Nolan, who is the leader of the New Age Preacher Church. At the same time, Will identifies Broussard by photo, having seen him among the attackers, and receives an order to find and arrest him. The Red Helmets head to his address, but when they begin to storm the house, it explodes. Will questions Broussard's squadmates, and one mentions a distinctive feature, a tattoo on the chest, which Will recognizes as a Special Forces sign. Broussard infiltrates a restricted area, where he steals the corpse of a dark-skinned man of similar age and build. Along with Alexander, they place it in a car and burn it. Throughout, the leader convinces Broussard of Katie's betrayal. Later, the police find a burnt car with a charred body inside, matching the description of the bar attacker, but Will once again doubts everything. Katie tries to contact the underground, but can't manage to do so. Finally, she finds an encrypted message with the name of a meeting place, where a car with Broussard at the wheel awaits her. Meanwhile, Will's assistant Jennifer finds in the database 14 people with Broussard's face, and he realizes that Broussard is not just a military man, but a former FBI agent. Broussard takes Kate out of the city and asks her difficult questions, as she shot one of her own, but Katie reminds him that she laid out one main condition from the start: her family must be untouchable. She joined the fight and served the cause faithfully. He doubts her loyalty. She leaves, unwilling to continue the conversation. Broussard goes to one of the resistance members, Rachel, and tells her about Alexander's order to eliminate Katie and how he couldn't go through with it. Will arrives at Snyder's in the Green Zone and reports that Broussard is called something entirely different, and he's very skilled in his field, but he'll definitely find him. In response, Snyder gives him an envelope containing a recent photo of Charlie. Will brings it to Katie, and through tears she asks her husband to rid themselves of Snyder's control. He promises to do so when he is ready. Meanwhile, Charlotte learns about Maddie and Nolan's relationship and threatens to fire her. Nolan decides to remind his wife of her place and offers Maddie to become his assistant. The police receive new information, with which Will goes home. He shows his wife a photo of Broussard and tells her that his fingerprints were found in their bar. This means he was there before. Katie says she doesn't know him, but Will shows her photos of his victims, and she recalls that he indeed visited them and said he lived in his mother's house and was fixing it. Jennifer immediately finds Broussard's mother's house through receipts from construction stores. Rachel comes to Katie, confessing that Broussard indeed killed many, but it's part of the resistance. Katie reminds her that she almost became one of his victims, but Rachel reminds her that Broussard didn't carry out that order. Then Katie calls Broussard and warns him that Will has figured him out. The Red Helmets go to Broussard's mother's house, but it's empty. The abandoned tools make it clear he received a warning. Will calls out to a neighbor who turns out to be Alexander, and he says he hasn't seen his neighbor. Will leaves but then stops. On Broussard's table lies the same book as in his wife's bar. Will's partner ends up at a factory where people often get sick and die. It turns out the factories are built on the moon. Will shows his children a photo of Charlie and admits he only started working for the government to get him back. That morning, the governor of the Los Angeles block arrives at Snyder's to inform him that the chief minister of the Pacific region is coming for an inspection. He assures everything is going well, but the woman is very doubtful. Katie goes to Rachel and learns that her underage sons are also in the resistance. She is stunned by the woman's courage, but still announces her departure from the group, fearing for her family. Rachel promises her support. Alexander calls Will and declares that his wife is the mole leaking information to the rebels. He sets up a meeting place. Will goes there. He immediately recognizes Broussard's neighbor, who confesses that he is the head of the cell and is willing to betray everyone for the right to leave the block. Meanwhile, Broussard meets with the leader of the youth cell of the rebels, from whom he receives information about the arrival of an important person. Will returns to Beau and tells him everything. Later he goes to Snyder and conveys Alexander's conditions. Snyder demands a personal meeting. In the evening, Katie returns to the topic of Charlie. If Snyder knows where he is, why can't he bring him back? But the conversation shifts to the meeting with Alexander. He reveals he is ready to betray the entire cell, and Katie immediately leaves for the bar, signaling Broussard along the way. Bram and his teacher observe the moon and notice changes in its surface. It seems that's where the alien mines and warehouses are located. That evening, Broussard comes to the bar, where Katie tells him about the leader's betrayal. He immediately goes to Alexander and starts asking questions, but Alexander demands he stop all communication with Katie and prepares for a new operation. The next day, Will takes Snyder to the meeting place with Alexander, who confesses he just wants to survive. He needs a universal pass to travel between blocks. In exchange, he gives a list of the group led by Broussard and admits they are planning an operation to eliminate the minister. He will set up a meeting for Broussard where the police will arrest him. Afterward, Will take him beyond the wall and give him the pass. Later, Broussard arrives at the designated place in the market. Rachel and Katie are also there, and upon spotting the red helmets, Katie immediately warns Broussard. A rebel throws firecrackers, causing panic, and people scatter as the military opens fire. Rachel dies, and Broussard escapes. Will goes to Alexander's house, which is under police guard, and announces the cancellation of the deal with Snyder. He is ready to let him run, but Snyder starts talking about Katie signing his death warrant. Will shoots the traitor and blames it all on Broussard. At night, people see Rachel's hanged family, and Katie promises Broussard her support. Will lets his wife know he's aware of her participation in the resistance. The following night, a spontaneous uprising occurs during which several red helmets die. Beau asserts that people's patience has run out. Will informs Snyder that he has information about a new rebel cell located beyond the wall. Apparently, there exists an unknown passage to the authorities. He asks for permission to let them go beyond the wall and check. Snyder agrees but assigns them a guard. Meanwhile, Broussard and Katie go to the leader of the youth cell, who proposed a joint attack on the minister. Everything is to happen in the subway, now used only by the masters. Will and Beau, having gone beyond the wall, climb a skyscraper and survey the entire city. They then simulate an attack on themselves. While their guard tries to figure out what happened, their commander finds a map supposedly lost by the attackers. Later, Will points out to Snyder the marks on the map, indicating the rebels' attack points. Snyder reports the found tunnel under the wall. Members of the youth cell show Katie a micro-drone, shaped like a bee, capable of flying anywhere and gathering any information. The rebels finalize the attack plan. Broussard teaches Katie how to shoot. At that time, red helmets led by Snyder come to Nolan's house, accusing Charlotte of hiding valuable paintings from the masters and arresting her. That evening, Katie finds a book about the benefit of the arrival, given to her daughter by Lindsay. She immediately calls Will and tells him about how the new church is indoctrinating children. Will then informs her that they will move to Beau's house, located beyond the wall, accusing her of spying on him, but Katie can no longer bear it. They constantly lie to each other, and it's killing their family, and hiding, even beyond the wall, is impossible. Will asks Beau to run alone. Katie and Broussard, killing guards, descend into the subway, open a backup entrance, and the group infiltrates inside. The rebels cause an explosion, derailing the train. Searching the wrecked wagons, people find an alien's body. Will learns about this and heads to the station, where the governor soon arrives, announcing the kidnapping of a master. There was already an incident when 2 aliens died, leading to Dallas's destruction, so people must understand what awaits Los Angeles if they don't find the missing master. At the same time, a group of rebels transports the alien to a secret location, blocking signals with metallic foil. Will rushes home and asks Maddie to hide the children. She suggests taking them to the green zone. He tries to find Katie, and Bram gives him a secret number his mother received the day before. While the rebels try to move the alien to another location, a curfew is declared in the middle of the day. Maddie and the children end up in a huge queue, and as they try to break through, Bram runs away. Meanwhile, the rebels hijack a Red Helmet's car and load the alien into it. At the same time, the police receive subway camera footage. Will recognizes Katie but doesn't show it. Bram runs to his teacher and leads him to the tunnel. Meanwhile, the group that kidnapped the alien moves through the city in a police car and witnesses a house being shot to intimidate residents. Snyder is removed from his position, but the governor can do nothing. Meanwhile, the alien is brought to a laboratory, shielded from any observation methods, and they attempt to open his suit. Will gives the rebel codebook to Jennifer. Together, they review the operation footage from Broussard's arrest attempt and identify the U-Cell leader, who is also in the database. The rebels figure out how to activate the communicator on the alien's wrist when Will knocks on the door. He asks to hand over the kidnapped and run, or he won't be able to save them. But Katie refuses to open the door, instead breaking the isolation, forcing the rebels to flee through a secret passage. At that moment, drones converge on the house. Katie opens the door, and Will calls the police. The alien is taken away. Snyder thanks him and gives him a universal pass beyond the wall. Simultaneously, Bram and the teacher descend into the tunnel and are caught by the police. Snyder is taken away by the patrol. Will goes beyond the wall to find his son, and Katie returns to an empty house. This concludes the first season. The story is set in a world grappling with a unique and terrifying epidemic. This epidemic, which has baffled scientists and experts for over 8 years, is spread through language and speech, making communication dangerous. The main symptom of the disease begins with a high fever, eventually causing the afflicted to speak incoherently, descending into madness. As a precaution, people have resorted to wearing headsets constantly, as the disease can be transmitted by hearing the speech of the infected. Those affected by the illness, known as jabbers, are swiftly quarantined and forcibly separated from their families, leading to public outrage and distress. The story introduces Murat, a linguist whose life has been profoundly altered by the pandemic. Isolated and lonely, he lives with his mother in an apartment, his life reduced to a series of cautious routines. Each day, Murat meticulously checks his temperature, a ritual that underscores the constant fear of infection. One day, Murat's attention is drawn to Sul, a young woman immersed in a book. At a bus stop, time seems to stand still as Murat is captivated by her presence. However, the moment is broken when she notices his prolonged gaze. Realizing he's been staring, Murat awkwardly shouts that no bus is coming and quickly departs, heading back home. The narrative continues as Murat, despite his reluctance, leaves his home to buy soap for his mother. While at the supermarket, he encounters an old woman who suddenly turns around and speaks incoherently, a clear sign of being a jabber. An alarm is triggered, announcing the presence of a jabber and urging people to evacuate immediately. In the ensuing chaos, everyone flees, except for the old woman and a young boy who is left behind without a headset. Murat witnesses the boy's mother crying outside. Driven by a sense of responsibility, Murat bravely re-enters the supermarket, gives his headset to the boy, and makes a narrow escape. Remarkably, Murat manages to avoid contracting the epidemic. Despite his close encounter with the jabber, he experiences a high fever but eventually recovers and returns home unscathed, soap in hand. Meanwhile, Anton, a high-ranking official at AEI, is desperately seeking a solution to the pandemic. He faces a setback upon learning that even young children are susceptible to the disease. However, his interest is piqued when he hears about Murat's incident at the supermarket. Intrigued by the possibility that Murat might be immune, Anton delves into surveillance footage to learn more. He observes Murat collapsing in the supermarket, but later continuing on as if unharmed, which deepens Anton's confusion and curiosity. In another part of the city, Murat visits the home of his mother's friend, responding to a desperate call for help. The friend's son, Arif's father, is exhibiting symptoms of the disease, speaking disconnectedly. Arif, holding on to hope, pleads with Murat to find a cure, believing in Murat's unique abilities. He even suggests collaborating with Murat's friend Ozgur, but Murat informs him that Ozgur has passed away. Arif, skeptical about Ozgur's death due to the lack of a proper funeral and the absence of his body, plans to meet with Errol, a businessman known for trading in information. Arif hopes Errol can shed light on whether Ozgur is indeed alive and assist in their quest for a cure. Meanwhile, Anton takes a deep dive into investigating the mysterious case of the headset left with a child at the supermarket. He discovers that the headset belongs to Murat, a linguist who was working on the pandemic case but vanished after a disastrous fire that claimed the lives of his team. Intrigued, Anton intensifies his investigation. Delving further, Anton uncovers records of Murat visiting the emergency room with severe fever more than 12 times. Using video footage from the supermarket, along with a temperature detector, Anton confirms his suspicions. Murat is immune to the pandemic. He deduces this from the fact that Murat has surpassed the critical threshold of 4 high fever encounters, a significant discovery given Murat's 12 instances. In the meantime, Murat, spurred by Arif's belief in Ozgor's survival, decides to investigate further. He meets a businessman who offers them access to AEI's resources, allowing them to gather information independently and save costs. With newfound determination, Murat boldly infiltrates the AEI headquarters and navigates his way to the information hub downstairs. There, Murat searches for Ozgor's name and is initially disheartened to find records indicating his death. He clicks on the autopsy image, expecting the worst, but is surprised to see an unrecognizable burnt face with no identifiable tattoo on the wrist. This absence of a tattoo, which Murat knows his friend had, rekindles his hope that Ozgor might still be alive. Before leaving the hub room, Murat impulsively searches for his own name in the database. To his shock and dismay, he discovers video footage of himself from the supermarket incident. Realizing the potential danger of this discovery, Murat hastily exits the room, unable to delete the record. His escape is filled with anxiety and urgency, knowing that his presence in the AEI database could have unforeseen and dangerous consequences. Soon after, Anton, fueled by his significant discovery regarding Murat's immunity to the pandemic, eagerly approaches his superior to share his findings. However, his excitement quickly turns to frustration when his superior dismisses his claims, cautioning against spreading unverified rumors. Frustrated by this response and determined to pursue the matter further, Anton decides to take matters into his own hands. He acquires the address of Murat and his mother's home, although under a false name, and sets out with his men to capture Murat. Upon arriving at the destination, they find Murat's mother answering the door, mistakenly assuming it might be her son. However, the AEI forces swiftly invade the home, scattering throughout the house and the apartment complex. They strategically position themselves, lying in wait for Murat's return to spring their trap. Unnoticed by the AEI operatives, Murat's mother subtly places a prearranged signal on the window, a discreet method of communication between her and her son. She then calmly lights a cigarette and sits down, maintaining an air of composure despite the tense situation. Meanwhile, Murat, who had been waiting for another glimpse of the beautiful girl he had seen at the bus stop, returns home. As he approaches his apartment, he notices the signal from his mother. Realizing the imminent danger, he hesitates at the entrance. Inside, Anton and his team are eagerly anticipating Murat's arrival, ready to execute their well-laid plans. In a moment of inner conflict, Murat grapples with the decision to enter the apartment. His thoughts drift to the beautiful girl, and the realization dawns on him that if he walks into the trap, he might never see her again. This thought acts as a turning point, and in a swift decision, Murat chooses to flee in the opposite direction, much to Anton's dismay. His abrupt departure catches Anton and his men off guard, and they lose track of him in mere seconds. Back at Murat's house, Anton seizes the opportunity to collect Murat's belongings for further investigation, hoping to get more insight into Murat's unique situation. The next morning, as Murat sets out on his search for Ozgor, he is stopped by AEI forces demanding to see his ID. In a moment of tension, as Murat nervously reaches for his ID, a bomb suddenly explodes nearby, causing the AEI forces to scatter and leaving Murat unattended. Seizing the moment, Murat heads to a location where he believes he might find Ozgor. However, his hopes are dashed when he discovers Ozgor is not there. Speaking with the man who made Ozgor's distinctive tattoo, Murat learns that since Ozgor's death, others have been imitating the tattoo, diminishing his chances of finding Ozgor. Meanwhile, Anton meticulously reviews tape recordings overnight and stumbles upon a recording of Murat claiming that he is incapable of jabbering, even if he wanted to. This revelation prompts Anton to rush to AEI to share his findings with a colleague. However, upon his arrival, Anton is informed that his boss Fazil is waiting for him. In a confrontational meeting, Fazil sternly instructs him to withdraw from the case. During this time, Murat finds comfort in a conversation with an old man who offers him a drink. As they share this moment, the old man tries to alleviate Murat's guilt over his wife's tragic death, which occurred after she was affected by the pandemic. He reassures Murat that it wasn't his fault. Murat listens in silence, eventually sharing his plans to venture into Zone 6 in his relentless search for Ozgur. Soon, Murat seeks the help of Errol, a man introduced to him by Arif. Errol is known for his willingness to do anything for money, and Murat needs him to create a false ID. They arrange to meet the following day. Afterward, Murat visits Arif's house, where he expresses his determination to find Ozgur and their shared goal of discovering a cure for the epidemic. Before he leaves, Arif's grandmother generously gives him some money, while his mother, having no cash, gives him her necklace as a token of support. However, their movements do not go unnoticed. One of Anton's men spots Murat and promptly informs Anton, who instructs his team to tail him discreetly. The next day, Murat meets Errol, as planned, to collect his forged ID. Just as they complete the transaction, Errol receives an alert that AEI forces are closing in on their location. In a frantic rush, they escape, successfully evading Anton and his team, who later search the warehouse to no avail. With his new fake ID in hand, Murat heads to the subway station, bound for the less monitored Zone 6. He smoothly passes the initial security checkpoint using the fake ID. However, his sense of safety is short-lived, as a security guard becomes suspicious upon recognizing Murat's face from wanted posters in the subway. In a coincidental twist, Sul, whom Murat has been longing to see again, suddenly appears in front of him. To his astonishment and delight, she kisses him right there in the subway, creating a moment of confusion for the pursuing security guard. This unexpected encounter leaves Murat feeling ecstatic. Holding hands, they continue their journey on the subway, embarking on a path filled with uncertainty, yet united in their unexpected connection. Murat and Sul, having left the bus stop, navigate through menacing people and areas until they find a secluded rooftop where they can talk privately. On the rooftop, Murat, preoccupied with his quest to find Ozgur, is about to leave when Sul insists he stay for a meal. During their conversation, he learns her name and he expresses gratitude for her assistance earlier. Sul then reveals her true intentions. She had been following Murat purposefully, hoping to recruit him into her team, P1, which is dedicated to finding a cure for the pandemic. Surprised by this revelation, Murat abruptly leaves, not allowing her to finish explaining. Later, Murat returns to the home he shares with his wife, where he is flooded with memories as he wanders through each room. That night, he dreams of himself torn between his wife and Sul, symbolizing his internal conflict. The next morning, Murat's search for Ozgur takes an unexpected turn when he is kidnapped by masked individuals who question his identity and affiliation with the AEI. At this critical moment, Sul intervenes, assuring them that Murat is not with the AEI and is on a personal mission. Murat convinces them of his intentions, and they agree to share information if they cross paths with Ozgur. Sul then brings Murat to his studio where she works, and after apologizing for the earlier misunderstanding, she hosts a podcast. In the broadcast, she discusses the AEI's cruel practices, relating them to the unjust death of her boyfriend, and concludes by emphasizing the importance of finding a cure to end the crisis. Meanwhile, Anton retreats to his house, where his wife and son are quarantined in the basement due to the pandemic. While there, Anton senses he is being watched. Upon investigating, he finds no one, unaware that Fazil's right-hand agent is covertly observing him from a hiding spot. Somewhere else, Murat and Sul's journey through the pandemic-stricken streets of the city continues. While walking downtown, Murat demonstrates his unusual resistance to the pandemic by briefly removing his headset near Jabbers, showcasing how his skull heats up without experiencing the usual symptoms. This unique ability intrigues Sewell, who sees potential in Murat's immunity. That night, Murat stays at the studio with Sewell, and upon waking up the next morning, he finds himself surrounded by the team Sewell had mentioned. The team members introduce themselves and request Murat's assistance. Initially hesitant, Murat warms up to the idea when Sewell assures him that joining the team could aid in his quest to find Osgore. As part of their ongoing search for Osgore, Murat and Sewell come across a hotel displaying the symbol that Murat associates with Osgore. They decide to investigate by entering the hotel and seeking an audience with the hotel's boss. However, their encounter quickly turns dangerous. In a moment of quick thinking, Murat leverages his past experience and knowledge of recording voices to offer the boss a rare tape. This move impresses the boss, diffusing the tension and earning them a chance to sit and talk. As Murat and Sewell are about to explain their quest for Osgore, their conversation is interrupted by a lady entering the room to deliver an item and collect payment. After she leaves, the boss encourages them to continue. Murat and Sewell reveal their search for the person associated with the symbol they possess. To their surprise, the boss informs them that the lady who just left was the one who brought the symbol to the hotel. Reacting quickly, Murat and Sewell rush outside to catch the lady, but they are too late. She drives away, showing no interest in engaging with them. This missed opportunity leaves Murat and Sewell with more questions than answers as they continue their journey in the uncertain and dangerous world. My friends, the continuation of the story is now on the screen in front of you. A man wakes up in the middle of a desert, not understanding how he got there and who he is. Suddenly, he sees an old man trying to escape the chase. The guy helps the elderly man, but he dies in his arms, having had time to name numbers 554, advising him to go to him and tell him that he got out. After burying the stranger, the man makes his way to the village. He asks the cab driver to take him to the train station, but the driver does not understand the meaning of the word. He tells him about his daughter and gives her name, 832. The guy remembers the old man and asks to be taken to 554. The man finds her at the bar and delivers a message from 93, but the woman is frightened and asked not to be dragged in. At this point, footsteps and a barking dog are heard outside, and the girl tells the man to run. He makes his way to the fire escape and sees a man in a white suit at the bottom, tossing a grenade in his hand. Then the man becomes dizzy, everything in front of him swims, and he wakes up in a hospital room where the man in the white suit calls him number 6. Later he declares that there is no New York, but that number 6 has always lived in the village, as his papers prove. Number 6 is taken to his house, but he looks around and goes to the street where he sees cheerful, happy people. He buys a map of the village, but there is nothing marked outside. A woman doctor catches up with him on the street and tries to persuade the man not to look for a way out, while he looks at the ghostly towers of high-rise buildings on the horizon. Then he jumps into an empty cab by the curb and drives into the desert. But as he climbs the mountain, he sees only sand and rocks in the distance. The action rolls back to an evening in New York when Michael meets a girl in a bar. The next moment, the doctor finds him lying on the sand and takes him to the village. Waking up, number 6 tells him about the meeting at the bar, but he does not remember what happened next. After getting to the town, number 6 realizes that the numbers on the doors of the houses correspond to the names of their residents, and then he finds house 93. He searches the apartment, not knowing what he's looking for. At that moment, number 2 enters, accompanied by a young man. Again, he convinces the man that there is nothing but the village, to which number 6 reasonably observes, if the old man has been followed, it means that he has learned something. Then number 6 can also get to the bottom of it. Number 6 goes to 554 again, and the girl confesses that the old man had drawings of his life before he died. Meanwhile, the cab driver and his wife receive an invitation to number 2's house, where he begins to question number 6, who at this time promises 554 that he will not come back if she tells him everything she knows. And the girl gives him a drawing of her dream, in which number 6 recognizes the Statue of Liberty, which thrills the man. It means he's not crazy. And that means that there are others who dream of getting out of here. At this time, the leader of the village, number 2, goes to his wife's bedroom and puts pills in the insensitive woman's mouth. Just then, his son walks through the door, unable to understand number 6's confidence in the existence of another place. And number 6, meanwhile, comes to the cemetery and sees a grave prepared for 93. So the management is ready to fake his funeral to keep the rumors at bay. This is where the doctor finds him. Number 6 suggests that she lie down on the ground and look at the stars. There are millions of worlds out there. Is there really only one? And where do the names of great men come from in his memories? Number 6 tells of a girl in his memories whose name was Lucy. In the morning, number 6 goes to 554's bar but is delayed on the doorstep when an explosion is heard in the room. When he comes to, he finds 554, but the girl dies, having managed to pass on 93's advice to go to the towers. The man tries to get the doctor to make sense of what happened, but the woman is frightened to death and asks him not to make things worse. Number 6 goes to number 2's house, blames him for the woman's death and promises to find a way out. He runs toward the towers, but a huge white ball appears in front of him and the man faints. In his delirium, memories of a boy playing on the seashore flit before number 6. In reality, he sees a man who calls him his brother. Number 2 tries to persuade him to admit his kinship, but number 6 does not believe him, even when he shows him their childhood photographs and reminds him of the scar he suffered as a child. Number 2 convinces the man to see a psychiatrist. The brother takes number 6 to his house, where he's greeted joyfully by his nephews, and the brother's wife announces that she has cooked his favorite meals and invites him to watch the show they never missed together. Number 2's son watches his father feed his mother pills but hides, not wanting to give away his interest. Meanwhile, number 6 expresses to his brother that everything around him is fake. He does go to the psychiatrist, and in the process he remembers Lucy. Then he tells her that he saw a seagull that lives by the water, and then it turns out that there are 2 doctors. Number 6 cuts the session short. Outside, his brother catches up with him, who has figured out how to get number 6's memory back. He takes him to the garage, where the man is greeted enthusiastically by his co-workers. It turns out that number 6 is a bus driver. The man gets behind the wheel and takes a tour of the village, while his brother acts as a guide, showing the local sights. Meanwhile, the psychiatrist reports to number 2. Number 6 is tormented by memories of another life which simply cannot be. And then the head of the village confesses that his wife has become like this because of him, and that his son, if he recognizes his real father, can abandon him. He demands to do everything to make number 6 believe in this reality. At this time, the tour bus pulls out of the village and number 6 sees an anchor in the sand. He swerves towards it and tries to convince the others that the object is real. There must be an ocean. He has visions of the 2 boys on the beach again, and his brother leads him to an abandoned building. This is where they played as children, but number 6 does not remember it. Later, the doctor tries to prove that these are false memories. Well, is someone going to make up another reality on purpose? Michael remembers Lucy again. Why did she approach him exactly that day, the day he was fired? A new day begins where everything is as usual. Clear weather, a constant soap opera, and the bus store, interrupted by number 2 to present his brother's family with a trip to a resort they won in the lottery. The man is overjoyed and hopes that number 6 will go with them, but questions about the sea stump the man. Meanwhile, number 6 catches the doctor looking at sketches of Big Ben and the Statue of Liberty, which he has taken out of his pocket. Number 6 accuses her of spying and recalls telling Lucy about his job as an analyst at the company called Sumacor, watching surveillance tapes and collecting data on people. And when he realized he was violating the privacy of others, he became despondent. That night, number 2's son asks his father about his childhood because he cannot remember it. Number 2 advises him to put all doubts about his family aside, while number 6 has a dream about his brother entering the water, ignoring his cries. Later, he leads 313 to the ruins because he feels a strange connection to the place. And then, following his memories, he finds an old box with a note he wrote as a child. The doctor considers it proof that the village is real, but number 6 claims it is a trick, though he has his doubts. Michael has another flashback. He was explaining his reasons for leading Sumacor to Lucy when she suddenly admitted that she too worked for the firm. She told him that he shouldn't count on the stalking to stop after his dismissal. That same day, number 6 is stopped on the street by a woman on the tour bus. She once heard the sounds of the ocean in the desert. Together they drive to the desert, but no matter how much they walk across the sands, the woman can't find the place. Number 6's attention is distracted by a bus on its way to the resort. The man rushes to the village where his brother's family is waiting for him at the bus stop. When number 6 finally arrives, they decide to take the ward bus to the resort. On the way, number 6 notices the towers and heads toward them. But images of despair flash before his inner eye when his brother is lost in the ocean. The man screams at the foot of the anchor. The vision changes. Number 6 is now tied to a pole, and number 2 puts a grenade in his mouth. There is an explosion and number 6 regains consciousness to the screams of his brother, who begs him to pick himself up. Confused, number 6 apologizes for his behavior and is ready to accept 16 as his brother when he suddenly confesses that he's not. He has been forced to lie. He doesn't know what they want, but it has something to do with the other place and he fears for his life. But number 6 promises that together they can stand up for themselves. 16 joins number 6 and the winking woman in search of the ocean. When they finally find it, 16 happily runs into the water. Number 6 remembers his brother's disappearance and asks him to stop, but a huge white ball appears out of the water and the man disappears. Number 6 tells 313 about it and they go to the place together, but instead of the ocean there are sand dunes in front of them. He returns to tell his family the news of his brother's death, but people are absorbed in the show. Number 6 screams in despair and is taken away by clinic workers, where number 2 comes and feels sorry for the man who has lost control of himself. He refuses to wear the number instead of his name but cannot remember his real name and agrees to be number 6. Later, number 6 meets a man who takes him to number 2 for an important conversation, while 313 realizes he has been dreaming and tries to sketch out what he saw. In New York, Lucy tries to leave Michael's apartment, but he grabs her and demands that she tell the truth about why he's being followed. Number 2 introduces to number 6 village spy named 909 who is searching for those who dream of the other place. He suggested the men work together for it benefits them both. One will do the job, the other will satisfy his curiosity. 909 tells him that the cell agents do not know about each other and it is likely that someone is watching them as well. While they are assigned to number 1955, a history teacher, one of his students has reported him. To get closer to the suspect, number 6 takes a job at the school. Observing a lesson about the history of number 2, number 6 asks a question about number 1, to which he receives the answer that there is no such thing and never has been. Later, number 6 tries to provoke the teacher by asking questions about other places, but the teacher does not budge, saying that he's fine with everything here. Meeting with 313 after this conversation, he shares his conclusions that everyone around him lives in fear. Later, 909 and number 6 observe the history teacher. He likes to swim and he always dines alone, which 909 finds suspicious. And to make matters worse, the teacher leads a group of runners who are prime candidates for dreamers. During this conversation, number 6 notices 313 ahead of the running group. The next day, number 6 holds a lesson and one of the students shows him the latest tracking machine, and he gives the students an assignment: find out who everyone is working for and what their goals are. That evening, number 2 gives his wife black pills and she wakes up. At night, number 6 and 909 climb onto the roof of the teacher's house and watch him with a camera. 909 asks his partner to fetch coffee from his truck, where number 6 finds surveillance log. He looks through it and discovers that he's the real 909's mission, and that 313 is also on the suspicion. The couple is talking about their son when number 2 gives his wife a sip of wine and she falls back into a stupor, and the man notices that the surveillance camera has been installed in his garden. At this time, the teacher also realizes that he's under surveillance and slits his own throat. Number 6 insists that the man must be taken to hospital. The next day, the cab driver is playing with his daughter in the backyard when a huge hole in the ground appears there. Meanwhile, number 6 searches the doctor's roof and finds a camera, not noticing that he himself is caught on the nearest camera. Number 2 calls 909 and shows the camera he found. He notes that his son is acting strangely and wonders if number 6 has had any contact with him. The agent denies it, but number 2 does not trust him. And number 6 follows 909 and sees him in a bar with the mayor's son. It becomes clear that the couple are romantically involved. Number 6 recalls Lucy's confession that she has been reading Michael's reports and understands why Sumakor wants to stop him. And in the village, he visits the teacher in the hospital and asks for help finding the other dreamers, but the man denies his involvement in any activity. The conversation is interrupted when number 6 senses that he's being followed. He runs after the stranger but loses sight of him, unaware that he has been spied on by his student. The next day, number 2 gives number 6 an assignment to spy on 909, but the latter first wants to warn the doctor. Only the woman shows him her own surveillance photos. He's the agent himself, having climbed on her roof. At this time, number 2's son is waiting outside his house for 909. The agent suggests that they take a break because number 2 suspects them. Number 6 enters and finds them embracing. He demands that they stop following the doctor or their affair will become public. Later, the father informs his son about the surveillance and says that he doesn't trust 909. He is determined to get all of his agent's secrets out. And then number 2's son goes to 909 with a knife. But the agent doesn't even think about resisting. He turns his back on the guy, letting him kill him. Meanwhile, number 6 runs to 313's house, but only sees her being driven away in a black van. He runs to 909 for help but finds him bleeding out. The agent asks number 6 to confirm that the dreams are true and dies upon hearing the confirmation. New York, Lucy tries to get Michael to admit why he quit his job, and suddenly she realizes he is already with those people. In the village, number 6 finds number 2's son in the bar and asks him to help find 313. Number 2's son sends him to the tunnels, a place inhabited by unmasked dreamers, passing the man off as sick 909. In the tunnels, number 6 finds his apprentice, who in turn helps him to find the doctor. But while they are looking for a way out, the white ball appears. Number 6 then wakes up in his apartment as the men in the white coats emerge from his door. Meanwhile, number 2 informs his son about the death of 909 and asks him to find up here. New York, Lucy says that she hears the name Curtis whispered on the decisions floor and insists that they go to Semacore immediately. Michael kicks her out. She writes down the number and asks him to call her if he changes his mind. In the garden of the palace, number 2 treats the student to ice cream and thanks her for stalking number 6. Then he exposes her for spying on him as well, so the girl has to go to therapy. At this time, number 6 wakes up to the voice of a woman announcing on TV that it's time for him to find a romantic couple. He goes to 313 and she explains that this is how all couples find each other. Meanwhile, a big hole in the ground is forming in number 2's yard, which he attributes to climate change. Number 6 goes to the Modern Love Bureau. At first skeptical, he is delighted when the system pairs him up with 415, a blind woman who looks just like Lucy in New York. In the meantime, number 2 has a conversation with the doctor. He knows that she's a dreamer and she will have to betray number 6 even though she loves him. And number 6 goes to see 415. The girl explains that her blindness is the result of childhood trauma. He tries to convince her that they have met before in another life and recalls how close they were in New York. Then the girl says she doesn't usually act so impulsively. And 415 agrees to go to number 6 apartment. The action jumps to different times. Number 6 does not understand where he is Michael and where he is in the village. He tries to prove to Lucy that they have met in a past life. The girl freaks out and leaves. The next morning, number 2 observes his son stealing samples of pills from the safe. The boy takes them to the clinic and asks 313 to determine their content. Later, the father warns his son that once he learns the truth about the holes and his mother, there will be no turning back. Meanwhile, number 6 and 313 visit the cab driver and his family. The cabbie shows them the hole in his backyard. While the adults are distracted by champagne, the little girl falls into the hole and disappears. The loudspeakers in the village announce that every house should have a pig to combat weather anomalies, as their breath is a proven atmospheric stabilizer. The hole in 147's yard is backfilled, after which number 6 goes to number 2, hoping to find out where the girl disappeared to. But he leads him to his pit and advises him to marry 415, or to jump into the pit and find out what's in there firsthand. That night, the doctor, under number 2's supervision, injects number 6 and 415 with a hormone drug that makes people fall in love. The next day, number 6 visits 415's father and he convinces him to think about marriage. In the evening, 313 meets number 2's son and reveals the ingredients in his mother's pills. One a strong sedative, another a hallucinogen, and another of unknown origin. In the meantime, number 6 tries to ease 147's family's suffering from a missing child, while the doctor finds herself in number 2's bedroom, where she sees number 2's wife sleeping. The man is interested in the possibility of reversing love. 313 speaks affirmatively, but she's against such a way of winning the man over. That night, 313 goes to number 6 and confesses her feelings as he falls asleep. People from the clinic arrive and take him away. The doctor injects him with the drug, but the man wakes up and number 2 confesses that they caused his love artificially. But the man disagrees with this statement. His love is real, and he intends to marry 415. New York, Lucy and Michael wake up together. Lucy feels that she's not being her usual self and tries to leave, but Michael offers to cook breakfast for her. The girl asks for oranges. The man's consciousness is double again. He proposes marriage to Lucy and 415, and both respond by saying yes. On their wedding day, the doctor shows up at the church to tell number 6 that his feelings for 415 will not last. When the bride arrives, 313 kisses number 6. Sensing this, 415 runs off into the desert. Number 6 catches up with her moments before the white ball attacks. The two women take turns flickering. Lucy convinces Michael that she needs to leave because she brings danger, and 415 is knocked down by the bright flash and the wave from the ball. Number 6 calls her Lucy and tells her about their meeting in New York. She tries to deny it but eventually agrees with what he says. Number 2 brings her to the village to break his heart. Distraught, number 6 comes to equally distraught 147, who wants to jump into another pit to find his daughter. Number 6 is trying to convince him not to, and while he restrains his friend, 415 jumps into the pit. At this moment, his apartment in New York explodes, which Michael, who was carrying Lucy the oranges, sees. Number 2's wife in New York opens her eyes. In New York, Michael tries to get into his apartment but is chased away. Lucy, in her recorded message, asks him to stay away from Summercore, but Michael rushes there. Distraught, number 6 screams at the palace gate, vowing to avenge the death of 415 without noticing his double looking at him from across the street. Later, number 2 finds his son in the bar. The son accuses his father of lying and demands to know where the village is, and he admits that he is in his mother's mind and that she did all this for him. Number 2 gives his son the key to the safe with the pills, offering him a day with his mother. 313 wakes up and finds number 6 sitting at her bedside. He recalls their kiss and reaches for her, but the woman asks him to stop. Number 6 leaves. The next day, number 6 comes to see her at the clinic. He mourns the death of 415 and tries to find out what is in the hole. 313 wonders why he didn't worry about it last night. Confused, number 6 claims he never went to her house. And when he goes outside, he discovers that he got into a fight with the cab driver yesterday. Confused, number 6 returns home. His apartment is in ruins, a receipt from a grocery store is on the floor, and the words "see you later" are written on the mirror. New York, Michael's pass is already deactivated, but he convinces the security guard to let him go down to the basement for a new one. Number 6 goes to the store and he learns that he bought a knife here yesterday. He tries to convince 147 that his previous fight was with an imposter, and then he sees his double. He rushes out in pursuit and catches up with him, but the doppelganger knocks number 6 to the floor and puts a knife to his throat. He demands to kill number 2, who is responsible for the death of 415. Then he stabs him in the face and disappears. Number 2 prepares to leave the palace and finds number 6 breaking through his bodyguards to warn him of the appearance of the double who is going to kill him. But number 2 begins to behave strangely. He refuses to go in his car and goes for a walk in the village on foot, throwing off his suit. Meanwhile, number 2's son sees a message with a warning about the appearance of his father's double and wakes up his mother. Number 2 meanwhile walks into a store and asks for cigarettes. The salesman reluctantly hands him a cigarette, then smokes with him, but after he leaves, the man calls the clinic. Mother and son are having lunch, during which the boy pokes his mother for information about other places. But the woman convinces him that the village has everything he needs for him. Number 6 again tries to warn number 2 of the danger, but he calls himself a vagrant without a number and is not afraid to die. Nevertheless, when he sees number 6's double, he agrees to get into the cab driver's car, and he takes him to his home to protect him from being caught as a wanderer without a number. Meanwhile, Michael goes to get a new card and recognizes the man as the village shopkeeper. The access specialist is skeptical until Michael proves that they share the same memory. 147 and his wife treat number 2 to cake until agents searching for the double arrive. Number 2 flees while his wife gives out for a walk without noticing the formation of a new hole in the yard. Later, number 2 comes to 313 and wonders if she wants to see the other place. He promises to grant her wish, even against her will. At this time, the son again asks his mother for permission to go to the other place, and the woman confesses that the holes appear when she's awake, and she also adds that the people born in the village cannot live anywhere else. The distraught son runs out into the desert and throws away the key to the pill cabinet. Meanwhile, 313 seeks solace in the arms of number 6 but realizes it is a double. She runs away haunted by new visions and finds herself in the middle of the desert, while number 6 tells number 2's son about the doppelganger and his intentions to kill his father. The boy names the location of number 2 and confesses that he recognized him. He is the doppelganger and the killer. In the village church, number 6 finds number 2, and he confesses that he created the village because he wanted a fresh start, free from the apathy and the cruelty of the real world. But apparently he was wrong. He recognizes the doppelganger and he's not afraid to die. The doppelganger grabs number 2 while the real number 6 appears. He stops to double. They will only win if they unite. At this point, number 6's double disappears, while number 2's son finds the key in the sand and puts his mother to sleep again. Number 2 returns home, explaining that his double has been found and apprehended. The shopkeeper is dragged to the clinic. In the middle of the desert, 313 finds a glass door with the Summacor logo on it and goes inside. At the same time, Michael and the master go to the task floor. In a room filled with monitors, profiles of the villagers are displayed. Michael recognizes the people as subjects from his reports. On one monitor, he watches Lucy's recorded warning until 313, following a long corridor, encounters a vision. She flees back into the desert. Michael goes to the window on the floor and sees Village Street and number 6. He knocks on the window trying to get his attention, but he looks toward the towers and turns away and leaves. Meanwhile, new residents arrive in the village who cannot answer where they come from. And at Summacor, the winking woman from the tour bus informs Michael that a car is waiting to take him to Mr. Curtis. In the village, number 6 receives a summons to the clinic, where he shares with 313 his concerns. The village is expanding. Apparently, number 2 is up to something. At that moment, the doctor receives his test results and is frightened. At the same time, looking around the village, number 2 tells his son that all of this is his inheritance. Their conversation is interrupted by number 6, who wants to know exactly why he's now certified to die. Number 2 replies that he has exhausted all means to convince him to live peacefully in the village or not to live at all. In the meantime, 313 continues to be haunted by visions from another life, but number 2 warns that she must not let the girl from the other place control her. Otherwise, she will not be able to help number 6. At the cemetery, number 2's son lays flowers in the grave of his friend 909, where number 6 meets him, asking him to help everyone get out of the village. The boy claims that his mother cares for him, but number 6 warns that she's also killing all hope in him. Later, number 6 feigns in front of 147, who offers to take him to someone who might be able to cure him. In New York, Michael is escorted to Mr. Curtis's car, where he recognizes the driver as 147 from the village. On the way, the driver explains that he used to be an evil man, but Mr. Curtis helped him change his life. In the village, 147 takes number 6 to the village prophet, and he tells him that the deliverance is coming, they just have to wait. But number 6 has no intention of giving up. He goes to see number 2's son, who is drinking alone. The man asks him about his mother and the pills and offers to run away with him, but the boy refuses. He has a case to finish. In the New York City, Michael visits Mr. Curtis, who turns out to be number 2's prototype, and his wife, who is in a dreamlike state. Mr. Curtis explains that the village is an experiment taking place in the woman's mind. She's sacrificed herself so that broken people could have a better life, if only in her mind. At this time, number 2's son enters his parents' bedroom and strangles his mother to death. Mr. Curtis confirms that it was Michael who found everyone in the village. Meanwhile, at the clinic, number 2 taunts dying number 6 with details of his upcoming funeral. Later, number 2 returns home to find his wife dead and his son missing. He and his assistant search the bar and discover that his son has hanged himself. Number 2 takes his body out and places it in a glass coffin. More and more earth holes begin to open up in the village. Number 2 visits 147 and asks that at just the right moment the man shout the phrase that number 6 is the first. Back in New York, Mr. Curtis shows Michael the positive impact of the village on suffering people. The man recognizes the inhabitants of the village who here in real life are cheerful and contented, and yet he's convinced that people should not be helped without their consent. Mr. Curtis offers Michael the opportunity to continue the experiment and gives him a pass to the Summacor's main floor. At this time, number 2 offers 313 a way to save number 6. Number 2 finally realizes that number 6's weakest point is his humanity. He's so right that he wants to live his life according to his conscience. If she wants to save him, she must give herself to number 6. Later, he reminds number 6 that the doors are open, and he can go wherever he wants. But first he must confess that he needs the village, and it is his fear that causes the white bowl. Number 6 sees this object and, unable to confront his deepest fear, runs away. The villagers gather for number 2's son's funeral. Number 6 comes too, for his fever has miraculously passed. Number 2 reads the eulogy and confesses to the crowd that his son's death was suicide and that they are all prisoners of the village. At this time, in a New York church, Mr. Curtis introduces Michael to Sarah, 313's prototype. She's mentally ill, suffering from the effects of childhood abuse. The man tells Michael that he worked with the girl for a long time until she resisted. Meanwhile, number 2 admits that he cannot save the village and soon everyone will be in the abyss. The child throws a stone in number 2's face and he points to number 6. He can answer all their questions and he calls him number 1. Mr. Curtis asks for help to cure Sarah, for Michael is number 1. The crowd begins to chant that number 6 is number 1 and will save them all. Number 2 tells number 6 that the only way to plug the holes is for a dreamer to take his wife's place. That's when 313 steps forward and takes the pills. Michael takes Sarah by the arm, catching her as she falls, and number 2 puts a grenade in his mouth. He gives it to number 6 and pulls out the pin. Mr. Curtis returns home and finds his wife healthy. On the appointment floor, Michael takes over as the new head of Summer Corps. On the high ground by the village, number 6 and sleeping 313 look out at the world around them. The man confesses that he has only now realized how beautiful it is here and intends to create a good village. 313 sheds a tear. The film is quite complex. It is not always immediately clear what is real and what is a flashback or hallucination, especially when it comes to the same characters, but everything is redeemed by a rather unpredictable ending which explains all the strangeness of the plot. Sunny Atlanta. The 13th day of quarantine in the city is on the brink of extinction. Panic and horror surround those who have managed to survive. No one understands how it will all end, but how did it all begin? 2 weeks before the current events. An ordinary day in Atlanta does not portend anything unusual. The city is bustling with life. Elementary school teacher, Caddy Frank, brings her students on a field trip to the local hospital. At the same time, on one of the floors of the clinic, Dr. Sanders finds herself in quarantine due to an unknown illness. The woman remembers that shortly before the first symptoms appeared, she had contact with a patient from Syria who was sick. In another part of the city, Jenna also feels unwell, but not because of the virus. She is anxious about moving in with her boyfriend Alex. At the last moment, Jenna backs out and confesses to a cop that she is not ready to rush. Alex is unable to sort things out with his girlfriend because he is called to the department. There, a major meeting is being planned, where the police are asked to prepare for a difficult situation in the city. There is a suspicion that the Syrian brought an unknown virus to Atlanta and quarantine may need to be declared. Dr. Sabina Lomers speaks to the police officers. She also talks about the threat of an epidemic but assures the audience that nothing serious is happening. Another main character who will face difficult trials is Teresa. The pregnant woman visits her mother's shop, where her mother reminds her that she is expected at the adoption agency, which is looking for parents for her daughter. The reminder upsets Teresa, but her boyfriend reassures her and assures her that he has everything under control. They will run away tonight and no one will be able to take their child. Caddy's students perform for the patients, but the teacher is concerned about why Dr. Sanders did not meet them. The doctor on duty pretends not to know about the colleague's fate and does not tell the teacher about the infected doctor's condition. Caddy begins to suspect something strange is happening soon. When they were about to leave, the doctors announce that the children will have to stay a little longer. The hospital is under quarantine and everyone must undergo a thorough check. Dr. Lorms arranges a secret meeting with Alex and asks him to take the situation under personal control. She admits that she has extensive experience but has never encountered such a virus before. According to the expert, the danger threatens not only Atlanta but the entire world. On-call officers are sent to the zero patients home, from where the doctors believe the epidemic began. Cops protect themselves as much as possible with shields and gloves and convince the patients' relatives that they should also take safety measures. The boy is in serious condition and is taken to the hospital despite his attempt to escape. Caddy realizes that her son and his friend Thomas have run away. The teacher goes in search of the boys just as the zero patient is being brought in. The woman notices the patient but refuses to leave the corridor until her students are found. Officer Jake Riley volunteers to help Caddy. Together they search for the missing boys, and the pair witnesses an even more terrifying sight: the bodies of Dr. Sanders and her fiancé. Fresh news reports indicate that the situation has worsened. The zero patient died after a severe period. The cops also learned about what happened to Dr. Sanders. But more frightening to the police is the fact that all the emigrants' relatives were also infected. This means the virus spreads very quickly and kills the host within 48 hours. Caddy finds the boys in a rat lab. It seems the danger is over, but the doctor informs her that the quarantine is extended for 2 days and no one will be able to leave the hospital earlier. During the report, Dr. Connor informs the police that they have identified the virus. He assures them that traces of the pathogen were found in the zero patient's personal belongings, and it all looks like an attempt to deliberately cause an infection. Teresa arrives at the train station to leave for her boyfriend's relatives, but unexpectedly, the train refuses to take new passengers and passes by. Upon learning that Jake is locked in the hospital, Alex directly asks Dr. Lorms about what is happening. The expert admits that a border is being established around the area that cannot be crossed for several days. By evening, panic begins in the city. People are surrounded by an iron fence, and many find themselves separated from their loved ones. Teresa learns that she and Xander are also on opposite sides of the cordon, and the girl will have to decide what to do next. Despite the measures taken, the number of infected continues to grow. At night, experts conduct an autopsy on the zero patient and discover that the virus affects all vital organs. Furthermore, there is evidence that it takes only 48 hours from infection to the end. There is no chance of recovery, and if a vaccine is not found soon, the world faces serious trouble. Alex manages to contact Jenna and asks her to stay in a safe place. The girl decides to lock herself in her office. Returning to her mother's shop, Teresa calls Xander and tells him that she is okay. Despite this, the boy promises to find a way and get to her through the dangerous fence. Jenna is joined by her colleagues who did not manage to leave the city. Meanwhile, the girl's fiancé receives a warning that he should not break the rules due to personal attachments. Jake is asked to help the doctors sort through the belongings of the sick to find their relatives. Examining the zero patient's mobile phone, the guy notices a frightening detail. A day before his death, the young man communicated with a blonde woman who had not been known about before. Jake immediately reports his findings to his colleagues, and the department decides to send a squad to search for the stranger. The police find the blonde's address, but her parents say she has not been seen since yesterday. Another emergency meeting is called, and everyone is ordered to find the girl within hours. While waiting for the doctor, Caddy listens to a news broadcast talking about the zero patient and the doctors who contracted the virus from him. For the first time, the woman notices discrepancies, but her thoughts are interrupted by Dr. Connor, who assures the teacher that everything will end soon and she and the children will be able to go home. Leaving, Caddy still decides to ask about her suspicions. She was surprised that Dr. Sanders died before the Syrian who supposedly infected her, but Connor avoids answering, muttering something about differences in immunity. Jake is sent to find the girl, and the authorities hope to hide the fact that the infected person is behind the fence. But it is no longer possible to help the blonde. The cops find her in serious condition in the apartment of old friends. The blonde and her friends are taken to the quarantine zone. But Lorms admits to Alex that the situation is too serious. The virus spreads faster than they could have anticipated. Alex calls his fiancée to reassure her, but he does not dare to tell her what the city is facing. The police have been ordered to strengthen the cordon and use weapons in case of violations. More people with symptoms of infection continue to arrive at the hospital. Among them, Jake sees many children, but the doctor says that this is not the worst. The hospital is running out of free beds, and soon there will be nowhere to isolate the sick. In addition to the bad news, the officer has an unpleasant task. Connor asks him to cremate the bodies to prevent outbreaks of other diseases. Another problem for the authorities is Leo Green, a local journalist. He continues to publish panic-inducing videos, and Lorms instructs Alex to stop the provocateur. The cop tries to negotiate with Leo, but the journalist is sure that the authorities are hiding something, and he must get to the truth. A few minutes later, a new video from Green appears online, this time attracting the president's attention. Jenna's colleagues realize that they will not have enough food until the end of the quarantine, and the men decide to go to the store. The girl does not like this idea, but the majority votes to take the risk. Teresa's mother also takes the situation lightly. The girl sees her mother raising prices on essential goods to make a profit. To entertain the children, Caddy takes them to the roof. This gives everyone a chance to breathe fresh air, but the girl does not have time to relax. Thomas runs away, ignoring the teacher's cries. The girl finds the student on the stairs, next to a sick man. Drops fall on the boy, and it becomes clear that he is now infected. Thomas is sent to isolation, and the teacher blames herself. She tells the doctor that she promised the boy's father to take care of Thomas, but let him down. The men return with full bags of groceries, but Jenna does not let them into the office. She notices that her friend took off his gloves, meaning he could have brought the virus on his hands. A customer who was charged too much brings her friends. They raid the store, but Teresa's mother is saved by Jake's appearance, who received orders to patrol the city. Caddy finds Thomas's ward empty. She catches up with the boy at the hospital exit, and his father refuses to leave his son in the quarantine zone. The doctors have no choice but to let the patient go. Alex's pleas have no effect on Leo, and in pursuit of a hot story, he allows his colleagues to leave the closed area. He is not even frightened by the fact that one of the girls has symptoms of the disease. Alex and Jake manage to meet secretly on neutral territory. Both guys are nervous, but they have to work together. Leo Green tells the whole world how to leave the closed area. The police have to hold back the crowd while workers cut the ladder. This leads to serious riots, and the cops have to open fire to kill. To prevent such incidents, the government shuts down the internet and phone communication, depriving everyone of the only joy, talking to each other. Caddy accidentally enters a closed room and learns the truth about the number of victims, among them or her students. At the same time, Jenna also tries to get to the truth, and she assembles a radio phone to call Alex. The girl has to climb to the roof to get the antenna, where she meets Sam, a technician who hid on the roof to avoid infection. Alex changes partners and goes on night duty. In the middle of the night, he notices an intruder and asks him to stop. The criminal turns out to be Xander, who is trying to enter the danger zone to his fiancée, but the cop does not let him do it and pulls the trigger. The bullet turns out to be rubber, and Xander is simply taken to the hospital. The officer visits him and apologizes, but warns that he will do the same thing next time. Leo decides to take advantage of this. He is preparing a scandalous report about the abuse of power. The store is visited by robbers again, but this time Teresa is also in danger. However, unexpectedly, the women are saved by another gang planning to profit from the quarantine. By the end of the day, Xander's ward is empty. The nurse says he left with Leo Green, but Alex does not have time to stop them. The duty officer reports that the guy has entered the infection zone. Dr. Connor shows Jake the rats that were injected with the medicine. Unfortunately, right before the cop's eyes, the animal passes out, and the hope for a quick rescue disappears. Jenna manages to call Alex, but the call lasts only a few seconds. The girl does not have time to learn anything. Leo accidentally learns about the call. He again hints to the officer that he has taken the wrong side and should think about what is happening. In gratitude for his help, Leo asks Xander to visit his friends and record a video message with them. The guy completes the task and throws the flash drive over the wall, but on it, the journalist finds evidence that his friends are no longer alive. After this, Xander finally finds his fiancée, but raiders block his way. The general panic is compounded by a new problem: hunger. People's food supplies begin to run out, and the government is forced to find a solution. Walking down the corridor with her son, Caddy meets an old man who supplies the hospital with lab rats. The woman notices another inconsistency. She saw Bert with the rodents before the quarantine, but he assures her that this is not the case. Lammers asks Alex to organize food delivery to the danger zone. The policeman asks for time to prepare, but is refused. He must do it by tomorrow without explanation. Alex has to ask Jake for help. The guy is also not thrilled with the idea, but they have no other choice. Early in the morning, the loading begins, and hundreds of people come to get their rations. The gang from the store also gathers for the distribution, and the leader orders Xander to go with them to stay clean. Jenna goes outside for the first time in many days to get some food. She approaches the distribution center, but a gangster car passes by, making her uneasy. Jake recognizes his friend and gives her a ration without a queue. He also hands her Alex's keys and asks her to hold on, as everything should end soon. Constantly thinking about the epidemic and inconsistencies, Caddy again turns to the doctor with questions, but he is clearly not willing to talk about it. The doctor assures the teacher that he knows no more about the virus than she does. The humanitarian point is surrounded by the store gang. There are many more bandits, and they take the food boxes to sell them to hungry people later. Alex is furious that the leadership did not listen to him, and the products fell into the hands of bandits. But Lammers does not see this as a problem. She believes that residents still have a chance to buy food and satisfy their hunger. Jake's partner turns out to be infected, and the officer offers him help, but the officer refuses to go to the hospital. He knows that no one can help him, and decides to solve the problem on his own. Returning to the shelter, Jenna falls into the hands of other bandits who also try to take the box. The woman is saved by Sam, whom she recently refused to let into the office, but the friends remember Jenna's recent act and, despite everything, do not let her or Sam into the clean zone. Alex and Jake meet again, and the senior partner admits that he no longer trusts the leadership. He tells his friend that, due to the robbery, he had to leave his subordinate in the danger zone. At this moment, this very subordinate calls Chief Esser and reports that their plan worked. Jake tells Caddy that she was right, something is being hidden from them. Dr. Sanders and her boyfriend had no personal belongings, but the conversation has to be postponed. Thomas's sister is admitted to the hospital, asking the teacher to find the boy. Their father died, and Thomas is left alone. Alex also begins to doubt the leadership's honesty, and he goes to Leo's house to hear his version. He finds the journalist drunk, but the guy comes to his senses and promises to help in the search for answers. Despite Jacob's persuasion, Caddy goes in search of Thomas. The gang is joined by the very cop sent by the police chief. He promises the bandits a radio phone in exchange for being accepted into the group. Thomas is not at home, but Caddy discovers her son, who secretly followed her. Quentin tells his mother that he knows where to look for his friend, and the company heads to the baseball field. The search for the truth has to be postponed. Alex is tasked with removing a man from an empty house who is preventing it from being demolished. The cop has to spend a lot of time talking about the happy past the city has lost. Teresa's mother helps the lovers escape. She gives the couple a bag of baby things and tells them to wait for her in a safe place. The company finds Thomas's things, but they are surrounded by a crowd of crazy racers. Jake has to open fire, and only then do the young people continue to search for the boy. Caddy finds her son and his friend, but they are near an infected man. The teacher is frightened, but Thomas assures her that he cannot get infected. Xander and Teresa come to Jenna's office and ask for shelter. One of the girl's friends is against the couple entering, but Jenna lets the guests in without his approval. Thomas is placed in isolation, but Caddy has hope that the boy indeed has immunity and can save everyone. During the meeting, Alex hands Jake a flash drive with a damaged file. If it can be restored, they will learn the truth, but only Jenna can do it. In return, the officer also receives a memory card with a message for the old man from the empty house. When he delivers the message, the stubborn man cannot hold back his tears. Teresa sorts through the baby things and finds the radio phone her mother stole. At that moment, the phone's owners appear at the door, holding a gun to the girl's mother's head. The company has to open the door, but the bandit refuses to take the phone and leave. He demands that Teresa and her boyfriend go with him. Unexpectedly, Jake comes to the rescue. He convinces the gangster to leave the office alone. Alex sees hundreds of people moving in an unknown direction, but no one can say where they will be placed. Jenna tries to open the file, but it is severely damaged. The girl does not have time to do anything with it. New guests appear in the office, a gang wanting access to prohibited drugs. The company begins to strengthen their shelter, but the intruders find weak spots through which they manage to penetrate inside. Tony decides to take a risk. He goes down to negotiate with the criminals, but the negotiations fail. The elevator returns Tony with an axe in his back. In addition to the deceased guy, one of the attackers enters the office, but he does not have time to harm anyone. The guy is infected and collapses at the entrance to the room. Jenna finally manages to restore the file, but the girl does not have time to watch it. The power goes out in the office, and all the doors are locked. To restore power, Jenna has to leave the shelter and go downstairs. Meanwhile, the bandits almost manage to open the elevator doors, but the girl raises the switch in time. On the way back, Jenna takes the radio phone and calls Alex. Talking to his fiancée, the officer hears her being attacked. The girl manages to break free and return to the office, but the intruders do not retreat and try to cut through the door. The company has no choice but to come up with the craziest plan. Alex tries to penetrate the closed zone to help his fiancée, but he is caught by the National Guard soldiers. Jenna orders everyone to take cover, and when the psychos burst into the office, Jake activates an explosive device. A fire starts, but all the attackers are unconscious. Unexpectedly, one of them jumps up and attacks Teresa's mother. The men manage to neutralize him, but the woman is infected. Alex is arrested, but unaware of this, Jenna asks Jake to call her fiancé and calm him down. She also mentions that the phone the bandits had has a government military number and they need to figure out how it ended up in the infection zone. Teresa's mother leaves. As a farewell, she asks her daughter for forgiveness for not wanting to accept her child. More than 48 hours have passed since Thomas's contact with the infected, and the boy continues to look healthy. His DNA is implanted in rats to try to create a vaccine. Connor reports his observations to the leadership, but the boss tells the guy that they don't have time for experiments. Caddy and Jake review footage from surveillance cameras and find out that the Zero patient was not the immigrant boy, but a certain Henry Burns. He came every morning to secretly meet with Dr. Sanders, and judging by the man's behavior, he knew about his illness. Dr. Connor allows Thomas to leave and informs everyone that the boy does not just have immunity, his body defeated the virus. This means that based on his DNA, they will be able to make a cure for the unknown virus. Jenna leads her friends to a church under which there are ancient tunnels. The girl plans to lead the group out of the cordon through them to safety. Alex tells Leo everything he learned from Jake, but the journalist cannot find any trace of Henry Burns. The men get the impression that the Zero patient was deliberately sent to the hospital. Lammers returns Alex's badge and authority, but in return she demands that the cop take Thomas out of the infected zone and hand him over for experiments in her unit. Dr. Connor disagrees with Lammers' decision, but she rejects all objections and insists that only her laboratory can find the cure. Everyone has hope for a quick return to peace and normal life. It seems not everyone will live to see this happy moment, but some decide not to waste time and enjoy the moment, using all possible safety measures. Leo finds out that 2 days before the epidemic started, Burns received a package with the virus. Now he wants to know who the sender was, but Alex asks him to postpone the investigation so he can carry out the order. All night the company breaks through the exit to the tunnel, and in the morning they finally go underground. At the same time, Caddy and Jake go to the meeting place to hand Thomas over to Alex. Dr. Connor realizes he was wrong. The patient bitten by a rat injected with Thomas's DNA is infected. During the seizure, he infects several more people, and the doctor understands that the boy is an asymptomatic carrier. If he leaves the cordon, the virus will take over the entire city. The company has to return due to gas that has accumulated underground. They remain in the infection zone. Meanwhile, Thomas ends up in the hold the zone between districts. He is met by Alex and Dr. Lammers, but at the last moment, the transfer is cancelled and the boy is sent back. While Alex tries to figure out what to do next, he receives a voice message from Leo. The journalist claims that the virus was created by Connor. Alex and Lammers remain in quarantine in the container between the zones. Thomas is returned to the clinic and quarantined to figure out what to do next. Jenna's company returns. The group could not go underground due to accumulated gas, but the office is empty. Teresa and Xander left to find a cleaner place. On the main street, the guy begins to suspect he was wrong. Hundreds of protesters are holding a rally demanding to be released from the infected zone. Xander tries to protect the girl from the crowd, but Teresa sees her mother in the crowd and tries to break through to her. Not wanting to risk his pregnant girlfriend, the guy decides to check who she saw in the crowd. Jake arranges a date for Caddy, and the couple has a great time until a frightened Quentin runs into the room. The boy says that old man Ray took the other children and led them out of the hospital to break through with the others. Leo meets with an ex-girlfriend and asks her to get Connor's call details. He has no doubt that the doctor's to blame, but to prove it, he needs facts. Xander realizes that Teresa was mistaken, but as a result, he encounters an infected person. The boy manages to escape. Unlike Bert, the old man has his box of medicine taken from him and falls to the ground. The street riots intensify, and a squad is sent to the danger zone. Lammers tries to stop the captain, but he does not listen to the doctor's orders, and several vehicles head through the cordon. Jake finds Ray, but the girl he took with him is not there. The old man abandoned her because of virus symptoms. Caddy spots Mary before Jake can tell her about the infection, and the woman takes the child into her arms despite the blood. The crazed crowd pushes Teresa to the ground. Xander runs to her but is afraid to touch his girlfriend for fear of infecting her. When Jake finds his friend, it becomes clear that she is now also sick. Caddy realizes this from her boyfriend's look, and upon returning to the hospital, tries to wash off all traces of the infection. Leo gets the information he needs, but it does not match his assumptions. Moreover, his friend tells the journalist that Burns called someone on an encrypted phone that only high-ranking officials can have that day. Susie, Jenna's friend, confesses that she is expecting a baby. Going for a test to check this, Jenna meets Xander and Teresa, who stayed on the street after the riot. Caddy ends up in isolation, and Jake tries to support her, but the girl's nerves can no longer withstand it. After 48 hours, Dr. Lammers and Alex are released from the container. There are only 8 hours left until the end of Caddy's quarantine. At the same time, Teresa's baby is about to be born. Alex visits Leo and finds out that on the day of the infection, Burns did not call Connor, but Lammers. There is no doubt that she started the epidemic for some personal purpose. Dr. Connor conducts his first round after leaving isolation. When he reaches Caddy, he admits that he cannot release her. The onset of symptoms has increased, and 48 hours is no longer a guarantee of health. The soldiers who participated in stopping the riot were infected. Lammers reports this to the journalists, but she promises to find a cure and save the country. At Alex's request, Jake inspects the apartment of Leo's friends, who were also investigating. There he finds ashes, all that remains of the documents and evidence. When friends meet to discuss this, Alex realizes that Lammers and the police chief are involved. Dennis, the father of Susan's child, returns to the office, but the man shows signs of infection on his face, and the company refuses to let him in. To make it easier for the man, Susan tells him that there was a mistake. She is not pregnant, and he has nothing to blame himself for. Alex meets with the chief and says he knows the truth, but it turns out that Besser did not know that Lammers released the virus into the masses. Jenna and Susan fail to ease Teresa's pain, but as usual, Jake appears at the right time. The guy calms the young mother and helps her daughter be born. Alex asks Leo not to publish material against Lammers until they have substantial evidence. An argument begins between the men, and the journalist agrees to wait no more than 2 hours. Not wanting to waste time, Alex goes directly to the doctor and asks her to resign. Lammers tries to intimidate the officer, but when she realizes he is not joking, the woman promises to hold a conference and leave her post. Teresa shows Xander their daughter, and the baby is placed in a crib made of boxes. Jake tells Caddy about this joyful event, but the girl's delight is overshadowed by a cough with traces of blood. Lammers gives a press conference, but does not admit her guilt. She claims that Dr. Connor accidentally released the virus. Still unaware of this, Connor conducts experiments and tries to find a cure. Jake asks him to try to save Caddy, and the doctor agrees to give her a trial dose of serum from Thomas's blood. Old man Bert regains consciousness and discovers that his leg is broken. Despite this, he finds the box of medicine and tries to get home, where his wife has been waiting for him all this time. Connor learns what Lammers did. He does not understand why his colleague did this to him, but despite this, the doctor does not give up trying to save Caddy. Giving her the injection, Connor tells the girl how the virus penetrated their clinic. Jenna meets Bert and gives him her water. She also gives the old man a cart so he can finally reach his wife. After the injection, Caddy gets worse. She is tormented by nightmares and barely waits until morning. To support his friend, Jake brings a TV and invites her to the movies. The couple spends the whole day together, but Caddy gets worse again, and she decides to confess her love to her boyfriend, fearing that there may not be another chance. Jenna tells her friend about her conversation with the gangsters. Trader Miz offered her a route to the healthy zone, but it is very expensive. Sam agrees to contribute his share, but only if Jenna agrees to leave the others and go with him. Alex goes to Leo's apartment, which turns out to be empty. After losing, the journalist refused to fight Lammers, but later the cop receives a pizza from a friend, in which Leo left him a note with an address and a key. Caddy gets worse by the minute, and Jake prepares to say goodbye to his friend. He asks the doctor to help him put on a protective suit, and when the girl falls to the floor, the boyfriend takes her hand to ease her suffering. The doctor tells Jake that he can say goodbye to Caddy's body, which is waiting for cremation. For the first time since their acquaintance, the guy manages to touch his friend's face without gloves. Jenna tells her friends about the opportunity to leave and suggests finding the money. But Teresa refuses to go. She wants her daughter to grow up a little. Arriving at the address Leo sent him, Alex finds evidence that will help him punish Lammers. Teresa, Xander, and their newborn daughter reach Bert's house, Teresa's grandfather. The young mother plans to stay at her relative's house until the end of quarantine, but seeing the empty shelves, Xander insists that they must run. Alex learns about a certain Catherine Hops, whose son was connected with Lammers. From her, the man learns the address of the laboratory and heads there. While Dr. Connor tries to create a cure, news about him spreads throughout the zone. A gang breaks into the clinic wanting to punish the doctor, but Jake convinces them that he needs to be protected to be the first to get the vaccine. This is the last thing Jake can do before leaving. He decides to run through the cordon to save Quentin. Alex inspects the abandoned lab and finds solid evidence of Lammers' guilt. He accuses her and names a True Zero patient who fell ill several years ago. This time, Lammers does not argue. She admits she created the virus and believes it is needed for the country's safety. But now she asks Alex to postpone the battle and focus on fighting the virus, which has now crossed the cordon. An attack occurs in the hospital, and one of the gangsters becomes infected. Dr. Connor has to give him the test drug. It is his only chance not to become a victim of the bandits. Jake prepares Quentin to cross into the healthy zone and promises to find him as soon as it is all over. Jenna's company also prepares to go underground to cross the cordon. At the same time, the body of the boy who tried to take the risk is examined, and an army is assembled so that no one else can cross the border. To prevent illegal crossings, the tunnels are mined and blown up. Alex tries to stop it, understanding that there may be people there, but the captain refuses to make concessions. Unaware of the government's plans, Ms. orders the fugitives to prepare to descend into the tunnel. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Dr. Connor transfuses Thomas's blood to the infected gangster, hoping this will cure him. Despite all attempts, the gangster cannot be saved. Because of this, Jake has to save the doctor. The gang leader cannot forgive him for the loss of his brother. The explosions catch the group deep in the tunnel. The ceiling begins to collapse, and the company is divided. Teresa, Xander, and their baby are left alone. Connor finds a way to make the medicine, but for this he needs people with the same blood as Thomas. Jake tries to find volunteers, but no one wants to participate in the dangerous experiment. Then the guy prepares a speech in which he names all the dead. For their sake, Jake asks people to get tested and, in case of a match, become donors. Ms. leads the group to a dead end, but the guide does not give up and looks for new exits. Alex learns about this and asks Lammers to stop the explosions and bring people to the surface. As an exception, Lammers promises the officer 1 hour. After that, all tunnels will be destroyed. Jake's words convince people and they gather to get tested. Xander takes his family to Teresa's mother's store and the girl decides to stay there until the end. The doctor finds blood with antibodies. A local priest can be a donor for the medicine. Old man Bert spills the last bottle of wine and adds a secret ingredient to it. He and his wife raise their glasses to toast that their suffering ends. Hugging on the couch, the couple prepares to go to a better world. Alex finds the fugitives, among whom he sees Jenna. The girl assures her fiancé will let them into the clean zone, but Alex does not know what to do. His time is running out. Dr. Lammers orders the tunnels destroyed, but at this moment, Leo's report about everything the blonde did appears on the screens. Alex does not let the fugitives go, but returns to the quarantine zone with them. And Jake, scattering Caddy's ashes over the city, prepares for a new battle with the virus that changed the world.
A welcome to the show.
A man is running through a dark forest in Ireland. He seems frightened despite constantly encountering signs with the words point of no return and various numbers, indicating either directions or distances to something. However, he fails to escape. Darkness quickly envelops the surroundings, a flock of birds flies overhead, and he falls into a pit. In the next moment, an invisible force grabs him and drags him away. Elsewhere in the country lives an artist named Minna, who works in a pet store. One day, her boss asks her to deliver a rare parrot to a zoo in a neighboring city, and Minna agrees. She takes the bird home for the night. There, she tells the parrot that her mother died 15 years ago. Suddenly, the bird starts to respond. In the evening, Minna puts on a wig and goes to a bar where she introduces herself to a guy with a fictitious name, claiming to be a ballerina. In the morning, Minna apologizes to the parrot for her behavior, saying the real her would probably not be liked. Finally, the pair set off on their journey. On the way, her sister Lucy calls, reminding her that she has family and nieces who love and await her. Minna continues driving and eventually ends up on a road leading into an old dark forest. Unexpectedly, the car breaks down and stalls, and the connection also mysteriously cuts off. Taking the parrot's cage, Minna steps onto the road to seek help, but the forest is dark and empty. When she returns to where she left the car, the road is deserted. Minna continues to wander through the quickly darkening area, talking to the bird to keep herself cheerful and suggesting they name it Darwin. Suddenly, she notices a woman running past and decides to follow her. Minna catches up with her near a small forest cabin, and the woman, opening the door, orders her to come inside quickly if she wants to live. Naturally, Minna rushes into the cabin. The elderly woman is named Madeline. She has been living here for some time with 2 other young people, Ciara and Daniel. She immediately orders Minna to stand in front of a mirror because the watchers cannot enter inside but observe from outside, coming every night after sunset. Standing by the mirror, Minna suddenly hears sounds like applause. Madeline confirms her suspicions. The watchers are applauding the appearance of a new object. In the morning, Minna announces that she intends to leave. Although the others assure her it's impossible, she heads into the forest. Madeline catches up with her, explaining that the forest causes hallucinations, but it is possible to survive here. The signs scattered throughout the forest mark the boundary from which a person can reach the cabin before dark. But if you go beyond the boundary, there will be no way back. They were made by a man named the Professor, but where he is now, no one knows. That night, Daniel puts on a show for the watchers, presenting them with the newcomer, but they ask her to behave as usual. Meanwhile, Ciara turns on the music and dances, as she does every evening. Minna, on the other hand, finds discs with recordings of Love Search TV shows. In the morning, she and Ciara go to gather medicinal herbs because her missing husband asks the girl to take care of Daniel. Then the man went to search for a way out and disappeared. Ciara explains that recently they found strange burrows scattered throughout the forest. That's where the Watchers go during daylight hours. She believes she has been in the cabin for almost 5 months. Later, Madeline announces the safety rules. Never leave at night, never open the doors for anyone, always try to stay in the light. Strange life begins with entirely identical days. Mina watches endless shows and often stands staring into the mirror. One day she knocks on it, and immediately there is a knock on the door. Madeline orders everyone to freeze and everything stops. The next day she and Daniel go hunting. The boy tells her that Madeline used to work at the university, so she considers herself a know-it-all. But she has been living here the longest. Daniel himself has been in the cabin for 8 months, but has never seen anyone. After listening to the boy, Mina convinces Daniel to help her explore a burrow. Using a rope, Mina descends, explores it, and finds old items, newspapers, toys, pieces of electronics, and an old bicycle, which she ties to the rope and sends up. But then strange sounds, similar to those heard at night outside the cabin walls, echo from the darkness. Mina screams and the rope falls at her feet. Climbing out into the light, Mina leaves the dangerous place, and they calmly examine the items. With the bicycle, it might be possible to escape from here, but Madeline has a rather strange reaction to this. Meanwhile, Daniel manages to assemble a surveillance system from the found pieces of electronics and installs a camera by the door. At night, everything goes as usual. Ciara dances when there is a knock on the door, and Daniel suggests that a person has come. Madeline forbids opening it, but they hear the voice of Ciara's husband. Ciara tries to prove that it is John by asking him what book she is reading, but he does not answer. Although they bought this book together on his advice, the man begs to be saved from death. Ciara asks to look into the camera, but when he leans towards it, something drags him into the forest. Immediately there is a knock on the mirror stronger than ever before. Madeline stands in front of the people, as if shielding them, and the knocking stops. In the morning, Madeline throws the bicycle into the burrow, demanding that they no longer break the rules. Later, Mina recalls her sister and mother, who invited the girls for a car ride. The weather was beautiful and Mina opened the window. Her mother asked her to close it because the wind was bothering her, but Mina didn't listen, mimicking her mother, who got distracted from the road, and the tragedy happened, for which Mina still feels guilty. Winter soon arrived. The days grew shorter, the nights colder, and food became increasingly scarce. Quarrels began to flare up among the cabin's inhabitants. One day, Ciara left for the forest. Mina caught up with her, and she confessed that she felt John was real. She runs to the house from where Daniel's screams are heard, angry with Madeline and Mina, refusing to let them inside. The women hide under a tree and soon see lanky, spider-like monsters emerging from the forest, approaching the cabin window, and making terrible shrill noises. The Watchers stare at Daniel and Ciara while Mina and Madeline wait for them to leave so they can return to the cabin. When they do, the women rush to the door and beg to be let in. Daniel refuses, and then Mina tells him about her guilt towards her mother. She asks him to understand that he will suffer all his life, realizing that he is responsible for the death of people. The doors open. The 4 of them immediately stand in front of the mirror, hoping to convince the Watchers that they are in place. Madeline admits that she tried to protect them from certain things. She used to teach history and mythology, and unlike them, came here voluntarily. Only here did she realize how dangerous this place was. Once she hunted alone and saw herself at sunset. Not an exact copy, but very similar. The Watchers are an ancient species with many names: changelings, winged ones, fairies. They study people to impersonate them, and they will never let them leave. Knocks and the voices of the cabin's inhabitants are heard outside. Then Daniel finds a hatch in the floor, which they didn't even know existed. Descending, they discover a well-fortified and equipped living space filled with food and equipment. Mina turns on an old computer, and a video recording shows the face of the professor, whose real name was Rory Kilmartin. He was the first to study the Watchers and tried to learn about their origins. In 1979, the scientist found this place, which he called Wonderland. Every evening, the Watchers came to his window and studied him. For many years before this, the professor's colleagues laughed at him, not believing his tales. Then he built this bunker, using the labor of men from nearby remote villages. He chose the lonely or those with bad habits so that their disappearance would not attract much attention, as every evening he convinced them to have dinner outdoors. Hiding inside, he watched the Watchers deal with them. Thus this bunker was built on blood. One day, a Watcher appeared before him in the form of a girl with red hair. She was very different from the others, as if she were unique and looked curious and harmless. That's when he realized that if he unlocked the secrets of the fairies, he might even conquer death. He did the impossible, lured this girl into a cage and began experiments on communication, trying to befriend her. She changed form, sometimes turning into a frightening creature with long arms, but seemed to listen to him. Gradually, she became close and understandable to him, but now the professor realized he had achieved nothing significant and was ready to end his life. He hid a boat by the river, and this is the only way out. Just follow the birds. He asked the survivor to go to his university office and destroy all the documents found there, and now he will go to her and stay here forever. In the last recording, they see Kilmartin climbing up. Gunshots are heard, and then all is quiet. Realizing that this is their last night in the forest, Sierra turns on the music and invites Daniel to dance, but he seems upset about leaving. He says his family is dysfunctional and he has nowhere to return to. Then the girl offers to let him stay with her for a while until they find him a good occupation and place to live, as they have become good friends. In the morning, the group sets out to escape, guided by the signs and Mina's parrot, whom she asked to lead them. Soon they reach a massive stone disc in the ground, covering the entrance to a huge tunnel. Madeline explains that this is where the last representatives of the ancient fairy race were locked up, who were once very friendly with humans. After many centuries, they managed to surface, but now the friendship has turned into hatred. They stay here because they are held by magic, so they need to run far away. They walk all day. Dusk falls, but there is no river or boat in sight. It starts raining and they fall into despair when they see huge flocks of birds flying in one direction. They run after them and reach the river. The women rush to the boat when Daniel hears screams behind him and sees John. He returns for him, rejoicing that the man survived, but it turns out to be a changeling. The women scream, begging Daniel to run, but he doesn't hear and dies at the hands of the Watcher, who then takes on his form while Madeline, Mina, and Ciara sail down the river. The women wake up in the boat and see that they have returned to civilization. They stop a bus and ride to the city, listening to music and only now realizing that it's over. Later, Mina goes to the university where Kilmartin worked, posing as his niece to enter his office and fulfill his last request. There, she finds more documents, photos, and a recording in which he discusses the fairies and the fact that there are still half-blood children in the world. Mina finds a stack of photos and, looking at them, seems very surprised. In the evening, Mina goes to Ciara's house, showing a photo of Madeline from the professor's belongings, explaining that it is his wife who died several years ago. So the Madeline they lived with in the cabin was a special fairy capable of moving during the day. It was she whom Kilmartin caught. He couldn't kill her, and she took on Madeline's form to return to civilization. Then a car pulls up to the house, and the real Ciara gets out, while the one she's talking to is actually a fairy. Realizing she has been exposed, the fairy knocks Mina out and changes shape again, turning into Daniel. They just want to live like other species, but due to human hatred, they are forced to stay underground. The fairy turns into Kilmartin and goes to Mina. In the house, the fairy transforms into her and prepares to kill the girl. But Mina says that there are others like her somewhere because she is half human and acknowledges that it was unfair of humans to banish the fairies from their world. The fairy softens and spreads her wings, admitting that Mina might be right, and she flies away. Mina revives Ciara. Later, she reunites with her twin sister Lucy, finally forgiving herself for their mother's death. She tells her about her experience, admitting that she still sees Madeline appearing in the forms of other people. Her nieces arrive to show Mina a drawing of her and Darwin, whom she still keeps as a pet. Meanwhile, outside, a girl with red hair appears, looking at their apartment windows and taking on the form of a girl with a strange face. This is probably not a horror movie, but rather a scary bedtime story when a child doesn't want to sleep and asks for something frightening. Everything builds up slowly and tastefully, but the ending unfolds somewhat mundanely, although mysteriously. It all begins in a desert, where a lone child stumbles along, gnawing on a human finger, searching for his mother. A few miles away, a car drives down a road that abruptly ends in the middle of the desert. The man driving the car steps out and continues on foot. Wyndham is a photographer who came here to capture the solar eclipse. After taking a few photos and noticing that the day is coming to an end, he tries to return to his car but unexpectedly encounters a boy who seems lost and frightened. Wyndham is ready to help, but the boy doesn't seem to want it. He points in the direction where he lost his parents and walks away. Trying to help the boy find his way home, Wyndham follows him, but the boy rudely refuses his support and leaves. The man is left alone in the darkness, with no way to return to civilization. Wyndham lies down to sleep on the ground, but struggles to do so, reliving the day's events in his mind. Suddenly, he hears strange sounds. He follows the noise and soon finds stakes with ropes strung between them, from which hang bottles that produce a melodious chime in the desert. Before him is a large canyon, at the bottom of which stands a wooden house, around which a woman is wandering, singing a song. Wyndham asks for help, but she enters the house, as if not hearing his pleas. He finds an iron ladder leading down and begins to descend. However, the ladder only reaches halfway down the canyon, and from there, it's just an ordinary rope ladder. Wyndham overcomes both and approaches the house. He knocks persistently at the door, but receives no answer. So, Wyndham opens the door himself and enters. The woman, standing at the stove, greets him calmly, as if she had been expecting his arrival. She offers him dinner, and although he refuses, she serves him some soup and places it before him on the table. Wyndham is grateful for her hospitality, but continues to ask questions about how to leave this strange place. He tells her about the boy he met and asks for water. The woman, named Alina, suggests that he rest until morning, and Wyndham gratefully accepts her care. He lies down in the bed she points out, observing as Alina tidies herself and notes that she is young and beautiful. The next morning, he gathers his things and heads outside, hoping to find a way home. But strangely, he cannot find the rope ladder he descended the previous day. Without it, reaching the iron section is impossible. Wyndham returns to the house and, taking out his camera, takes pictures of the surroundings and the drawings on the canyon walls. Everything is quite gloomy and reminds him of death in all its forms. He then notices Alina, who is busy repairing the roof, and asks her about the missing ladder, but she either does not understand what he is talking about or pretends not to. Although her words imply that there are other residents here, she does not tell him anything directly. Disappointed, Wyndham walks around the canyon, periodically calling for help, but to no avail. Later, Alina asks him to undress so she can wash his clothes, saying it wouldn't be proper to return home so dirty. The man has no choice but to comply. That night, he struggles to sleep again, goes outside, and once again tries to find a way out, but there is none. In the morning, he searches the house and, finding a hammer, tries to climb the canyon wall. Suddenly, he notices a movement above, and then a chicken carcass falls down, causing him to lose his balance and fall. Wyndham regains consciousness in the darkness. His leg is injured by his own hammer, and he cries out in pain. Alina rushes to help him, but she does not answer his questions about the children he saw on the cliff. For several days, he drifts in and out of fever, unable to distinguish between night and day, unsure if he is truly seeing children around him. But the day of recovery comes. Limping, Wyndham makes his way outside. He demands that Alina tell the children above to pull him out of there, but she pretends not to understand him. She offers him to stay, promising to take care of him and ensure his well-being. But Wyndham doesn't need this. He wants to return home, to his work. He rudely pushes Alina away, rejecting any help. The man examines his leg and realizes that it will be a long time before he can use it fully. Suddenly, he hears voices from above and looks up to see the boy holding a little girl by the hand. The pair cheerfully ask how they can help, and upon learning that Wyndham wants to climb up, the boy promises to bring ropes and pull him out with his winch. But before leaving, he asks a rather strange question about Wyndham's favorite color. Wyndham replies that it's red and begs them to hurry. The boy and girl leave, and Wyndham checks his wallet in his pocket, not intending to return for his other belongings. Suddenly, a rope falls from above, and the same boy advises him to tie himself tightly, which Wyndham does. They begin to pull him up, and the man is already anticipating his rescue, but about halfway up, the rope stops. Dangling over the canyon, Wyndham screams, then tries to climb the rope himself, but lacks the strength and ends up hanging helplessly under the merciless sun. He regains consciousness from moisture, but when he looks up, he sees the boy spraying him with a hose, mocking the helpless man. Several other children appear on the cliff, ranging from very young to older teens. They are all dressed in clothes obviously taken from other people and behave inappropriately. Taunting Wyndham, they start swinging the rope, causing him to crash into the canyon walls, instinctively calling out for help from Alina. He sees the woman shouting angrily at the foolish children and loses consciousness after another blow to the wall. That night, he wakes up in bed and immediately tries to get up. Alina doesn't understand where he is headed, but Wyndham is willing to do anything to escape. The woman explains that the children are homeless, gathered in the desert together, surviving as best they can. Neither of them notices that while they talk, the children stand on the cliff, watching the house's windows burn. The next day, Wyndham watches as Alina releases a bird, envying its ability to fly. The woman brings him a spare set of clothes from somewhere, and although he didn't ask for them, he is touched by her care. Time passes. One day, Wyndham plants a small garden at the bottom of the canyon. Occasionally, the children bring them various items, food and drinks, which surprises Wyndham since there are no stores around. He doesn't understand their behavior. First, they feed him, then they mock him, but Alina accepts it all as normal. The man becomes more involved in the household, marveling at Alina's quiet demeanor. One night, he tries to ask her questions, which are interrupted by cries from the yard. Alina advises Wyndham not to go outside when the children behave like that, but he rushes out into the night and sees the boys, dressed in outlandish clothes, gathered around the house. They start taunting him, pushing and beating him, but suddenly disappear into the night. Wyndham demands answers from Alina. Who are these children? Why do they live here? And why does she stay in this horrible place? But the woman remains calm, not admitting that she is a prisoner. That evening, she comes to Wyndham. The man, starved for female attention, eagerly welcomes her. Time passes, and the first sprouts appear in Wyndham's garden. One day, the boy in the cap calls to him from above. He is friendly and promises to bring some soda. Wyndham returns to his plants and unexpectedly finds a wedding ring and car keys buried in the sand. That evening, Alina shows him a portrait of a woman. Calling her the first mother, she confesses that she is expecting his child. Stunned, Wyndham can't believe his ears. He never wanted to have children here, especially with a woman he barely knows. He yells at Alina, but he has no choice but to accept it. The next morning, he finds his garden destroyed by local birds, but Alina willingly helps him replant, which earns his gratitude. Gradually, life in the house falls into some semblance of order. Alina runs the household, and Wyndham exercises, working on his leg. One day, the boy in the cap visits again. He is very curious and asks Wyndham many questions. Wyndham asks him to help Alina, as she is going to have a child, and they will need a doctor. The man asks the boy to bring some rope and something heavy to use as a counterweight. He plans to climb out and take them to the city, where he can take care of the woman and the boy. The boy promises to do everything when everyone is asleep or gone, but then one of the older boys appears and takes him away. Later, Wyndham tells Alina that the boy wants to study, that he is smart, different from the others, and wants to live differently. The man wants to help him, and help her too, but Alina reacts strangely. She tries to find out exactly what Wyndham is missing here. When he mentions freedom, Alina is puzzled. After all, no one forbids him from doing anything here. Isn't that freedom? Then the man tells her about the outside world, remembering the ocean and a cheeseburger. Alina doesn't know what that is, so Wyndham explains what the dish consists of. The woman admits that her mother used to say that mirages live outside. But here, in the desert, everything is real. Wyndham takes out his camera and shows her the photos he took on the day he ended up here. But what impresses the woman is not the solar eclipse, but a random shot in the car with music playing in the background. At night, he has nightmares about the terrifying faces of the children mocking someone. In the morning, he hears Alina's terrible scream from the yard, and rushing outside, he sees the boy in the cap crucified over the canyon on wires. The savages stand on the cliff, laughing. The woman suddenly declares that brothers wouldn't do such a thing. She accuses Wyndham of killing her son and strikes him on the head with a board. When he comes to, Wyndham finds himself in a cage. Despite his pleas and begging, Alina has no intention of letting him go. She feeds him like an animal, and her children come to watch his suffering. One day, he sees a girl standing on the cliff. She is clearly not from here. Wyndham catches her attention, though he is terrified to shout, fearing to wake Alina. Whispering, he begs the girl to call for help. She understands him, promises to do everything necessary, and leaves, assuring him she will return soon. Wyndham waits in hiding, watching the heavily pregnant Alina as she goes about her chores. Suddenly, he hears screams and sees the savages catching the girl. They drag her to the cliff and dramatically kill her before his eyes. Time passes. Wyndham remains in the cage. He involuntarily witnesses unnatural rituals performed by Alina, her children, and her brothers. One day, he suddenly tells Alina that he wants to stay here forever, to raise his child and love Alina, who will become his queen. He will teach the child everything he knows and is ready to give himself completely. And this is his choice. But hearing the word choice, the woman laughs. He never had one. He is just a seed blown here by the wind. And this child is only hers. The man will stay in the cage until the baby is born. After that, nothing in the desert goes to waste. Finally, the day of birth arrives. Alina screams in the house as Wyndham paces in the cage. The woman reaches him, begging for help, as she has never had such a difficult birth before. She releases the man from the cage, and he does his best to ease her pain. The children stand on the cliff, watching what is happening. Suddenly, Wyndham sees a ladder descending from above, but Alina cries out, and he stays by her side. The child is born at the moment of the solar eclipse. Wyndham takes the baby girl in his arms and kisses her, overjoyed to be a father. Alina begs him to give the baby to her, and when she receives the child, she promises to feed and protect her until she becomes the new mother. Then she will fulfill her purpose, just as Wyndham has fulfilled his now. At that moment, the boy sneaks up and slits the man's throat, exulting over the collapsing body, assuring him that he is doing it for the mother. Later, Alina gathers Wyndham's belongings and packs them in a chest, then goes to the baby, promising her that everything will be fine. Meanwhile, Wyndham's body decomposes in the yard of the house, sprouting grass and turning to dust. This is where this unusual film ends. On Earth, there comes a moment when governments resort to extreme measures and release poisonous substances into the world to reduce the population.
Money's the only god you have left. Take him to the Snake Eyes, sweet.
People were leading their normal lives when one day planes appeared in the sky, dispersing a black substance that caused death to anyone exposed to it. Those whose bodies proved resistant to the poison were left to cling to the remnants of the past or adapt to the new reality. The government was absent, and taking advantage of this, gangs proliferated in the American Midwest, dividing territories and eliminating dissenters. One of these groups wore animal heads and called themselves Players, alongside others known as the Plowers, Cherries, Killers, and many more. One day, Mark West, in the hope of saving their crumbling marriage, agrees to take his wife to her parents' house in Milwaukee. His friend tries to convince him to take a more suitable car, but Mark loves his car too much and doesn't want to abandon it. Almost immediately, the car breaks down. Mark and Nina find an abandoned auto repair shop, and while Mark is fixing the breakdown, Nina looks at old photographs and listens to the radio. At that moment, the doors open, and several armed men enter. The couple is saved by the fact that they are in a separate room. Mark asks his wife to step on the gas. The car crashes through the wall and out of the room just as another gang bursts through the open doors, crushing the initial arrivals. Mark's car starts just in the nick of time, and they barely manage to escape their pursuers. The radio host reminds them of the need to find shelter for the night, since gangs are roaming everywhere, so Mark turns towards what appears to be an abandoned house. The couple explores the house, and while Nina gathers anything that might be useful, Mark discovers mutilated bodies in the bedroom. While Nina tries to contact her mother, Mark carries the bodies outside and sets them on fire. They spend the night in a guest bedroom. Mark plots a path, choosing routes that are free from the executioner's gang, while Nina recalls how her husband had tried to ask her father for a magnificent collector's pistol and hopes that if they make it out unscathed, her father will still give it to Mark. Nina extinguishes a candle, unaware that they are being watched by a man who is captured by the executioner's gang next morning, and, under torture, reveals information about the traveling couple. After disposing of the informant, the gang heads to the house where Nina and Mark are resting. Mark goes through his morning routine when he hears the sound of a motorcycle engine. He hides his wife in the attic and conceals himself in the house. One of the gang members goes upstairs while Nina puts on headphones and plays music to drown out the footsteps of the killer. The faint noise alarms him, and the man turns his back to the door to the room, which costs him his life as he is killed with a single precise blow to the head. His partner spots Mark and attacks him. A fight ensues, during which Mark manages to strike the bandit in the eye with a makeshift weapon, leaving him lying on the living room floor. Having escaped the danger, the couple continues on, unaware of any surveillance. Soon, Mark and Nina stop at a looted supermarket. People are attempting to replenish their supplies when a masked man appears in front of them and orders Mark to drop his gun. Suddenly, he removes his mask and extends his hand. Mark doesn't trust his friendliness, but the man lifts and hands back Mark's gun. Mark then shakes his hand. Nate Wood is glad to meet normal people, but at that moment, the sound of engines can be heard, and the new acquaintance instructs the couple to hide. A group of bandits enters the store, and it turns out they are also looking for the couple. Unfazed by the situation, Nate invites the couple to dinner, showing them a photo of his wife, Teresa. Suddenly, there is a burst of machine gun fire, and the bandits fall, while Nate's son, Steve, emerges from hiding. Upon stepping outside, Nate insists that the couple join him. The road ahead is long, and they haven't seen normal people in a while, so they would be happy to treat them to dinner and wine. Mark and Nina agree. Nate takes the pickup truck while he attaches the family's car to a trailer, explaining that it's for safety. Along the way, they are stopped by members of the Plowers gang. They exchange news, and the gang's leader, upon seeing Nina, suggests to Nate that he sell her. Nate laughs it off, saying that they are his friends. The bandit boasts about capturing a girl who is sitting in his cab, whom he named Betsy. Mark and Nina sense tension between the conversing parties, but Steve reassures them that the Plowers gang is weak and won't go against his father. As it turns out, he's right. The bandits clear the road, and Nate takes the family to his home, unaware that Mark's adversary, who survived, is trailing them. Inside Nate's house, he questions Mark about the purpose of their journey and advises Nina to open her eyes. If their relatives aren't responding, they are most likely no longer alive. Just then, Teresa invites everyone to the table. People enjoy peace and delicious food, and when a song comes on the radio that Teresa calls their song, the couple dances, bringing smiles to the children's faces. Steve talks about the bandits they encountered, while Nina, unable to bear hearing about violence, asks Nate's daughter Bella to take her to the children's room. Teresa accompanies them, and the women discuss family matters. Meanwhile, the men wash the dishes, and the host confesses that they just ate human flesh. Mark feels nauseous as Nate gives a speech about how only the ruthless have survived. He informs them that either the couple stays with them or he'll let them become prey. Women arrive, sensing something is amiss, but then a bandit enters through the back door, holding Bella hostage. He's willing to release the girl in exchange for Mark and Nina. Nathan agrees, and the villain lets the girl go, but aims at Mark. As the bandit takes aim, Steve, who had stealthily approached the bandit, cuts his leg with a knife. The bandit falls but manages to pull the trigger, and a bullet hits Teresa. While Nathan is distracted, Mark and Nina make a run for it, hop into their host's car, and drive away. Gunshots continue to echo from the house. They drive down the road, and Nina confesses that she can no longer play these insane survival games. They argue, unaware that ahead of them lies an ambush set by people hiding their faces behind animal masks. A shot rings out, and Nina is hit in the shoulder. Mark quickly turns the car around. Meanwhile, Nathan contacts the leader of the Plowers, and, informing him that his wife and daughter are dead, allows them to take the blonde. An enthusiastic bandit heads to the garage where he receives a blow to the head from Betsy. Armed, she then releases the captive women, revealing that she belongs to the Cherry Gang, and drives the gang leader's car out of the gate. In the meantime, Mark finds a small house in the wilderness, tends to Nina's wound, and puts her to bed. He then goes out in search of food. Nina wakes up and discovers notes from her husband all around, helping her navigate the house. She gets dressed and, after looking around, starts packing a suitcase, intending to leave alone when Mark enters a nearby room. Silence prevails everywhere, so he goes upstairs and finds Nathan and Steve tied up with bags over their heads. But when he questions how they got there, a very colorful character enters the room, suggesting they have some fun because, after all, showtime is his life. Meanwhile, Betsy drives down the road, listening to the screams of the bandit she locked in the trunk. Suddenly, she notices Nina behind some bushes and goes after her, while the bandit, who introduces himself as William Cunningham, tries to find out why Nathan and Steve were tailing Mark. Mark recognizes the quotes William is using, and William is pleased with his erudition. He then introduces his buddy, Big Guy, and offers to have a fight with him, promising to let Mark go if he wins. During this time, Nina stumbles upon a box of records, and on one of the envelopes, there's a note asking to give her husband another chance. She finds some alcohol, plays music, and, under Betsy's watchful eye, loses herself in the music while her husband fights the brute. Mark takes a beating until his opponent throws him right at William, and Mark ends up with William's gun, which he promptly fires, ending the showman's life. Betsy makes a decision and kills the bandit in the trunk just as Mark bids farewell to Nathan, Steve, and Big Guy. Mark returns to the house where he left Nina and shoots with the rifle found in the yard. For the first time, Nina shows an interest in firearms, and Mark teaches her how to shoot, which she turns out to be surprisingly good at. She leads her husband to the garage when Betsy enters the house and finds a ring that Nina had taken off when contemplating running away from her husband. And at that moment, she shows her husband a car just like his, and upon learning that he wasn't very popular with girls and thus didn't experience familiar sensations felt by many American guys, she suggests rectifying that in the car. The process is interrupted by the animal-masked bandits who capture the couple and take them to their base. There, they are brought into a room and seated at a table with 2 sticks attached to it, each with a gun affixed. Their hands are fastened to the gun handles, and they are offered to play a game. 1 bullet in the chambers, and if they're lucky and don't shoot each other for 6 rounds, the couple will be set free. Nina then asks to add more bullets, but reduce the number of rounds, which the bandits agree to. The couple begins the game, and in the second round, Mark is shot in the shoulder. The crowd rejoices, and the 2 ladies start squabbling, which helps Nina free her hand. She grabs the judge's gun, shoots him, and fires at the sticks holding the pistols. Then she positions her shoulder under Mark's semi-conscious body and makes her way to the door. She is intercepted by the brothel's leader, but under the barrel of gun, she has no choice but to let the family go, since people with weapons are not allowed in the room according to their rules. The couple gets into a car and drives away while the gang arms itself and starts chasing them, losing a couple of sentries to Betsy's gunfire. Nina presses the gas pedal and finally arrives in Milwaukee, where she learns that her parents have passed away. Neighbors hand her a letter addressed to their daughter, in which her mother asks Nina not to abandon her husband. Later, neighbors show her how they have fortified their defense. Barricades made of cars on the roads, a constant lookout on the roof, and a tripwire stretched across the street that can be activated with a winch. If someone drives over the tripwire, it triggers an explosion sufficient to demolish a house. At this point, the town is greeted by a longtime friend of her father, Phil, while Betsy infiltrates one of the houses and sets up a shooting platform by the window. Meanwhile, Nina overhears Phil reporting her arrival to someone. She goes to his house, but the man hides behind blinds. Then his radio comes to life, reporting that they are 1 minute away, and Nina recognizes the voice. She realizes that the bandits are heading to the town, and upon seeing a neighboring girl on the road, she hides her in a house. She grabs a rifle and prepares to confront the players. The gang stops their cars right under the window of the house where Betsy is positioned, and the sentry also aims at them. Nina opens fire, immediately supported by Betsy, taking down half of the gang. At that moment, the girl escapes from the house, and while Mark tries to catch her, one of the bandits attacks him. Nina throws a homemade grenade at the cars, and Mark kills his attacker with the bandit's own horn. Phil watches in horror as Betsy gets wounded. And there, Nina sees the speeding Plowware's car, which can easily sweep away anyone in its path. She rushes to the winch and tightens the tripwire, which the armored car brushes aside. But then, the explosives go off, and the car flips over. Among the attackers, only 1 female bandit remains, who heads into the house where the wounded Betsy is at that moment, handing Mark her ring before succumbing to a bullet fired by the bandit. The bandit queen prepares to shoot Mark, but she receives a bullet from Nina. While Mark recovers from the transformation of his wife, she confronts Phil and finds bloody footprints of a child and a murdered man. On the table, Nina finds a familiar box, takes it, and goes home, encountering a neighboring girl with bloody hands on the street. Nina hands the box to her husband, and he finds the long-desired pistol of her father inside. Then he places the lost ring back on her finger. The couple leaves the town in search of a better place, while the radio reports about a family that has destroyed a bunch of bandits, so the villains need to rethink their actions.